just asked you a while ago if you're a turkey hunter, and you said, oh, absolutely. And I said, this is one of the things that someone in your position, which we're about to let everybody know who you are, and thank you again, first of all, for coming on, but someone in your position, you either just fell into it or something just happened. Seems like you got that person, or if you're the turkey biologist, the main man for the state of Louisiana, you just absolutely love turkeys. And you said I love turkey hunting, and you said you absolutely love turkey hunting.
Yeah, that's correct. I couldn't imagine not doing it for sure.
Well, brother, thank you for coming on. So introduce yourself to everyone. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Cody Sedotal. I work for the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Been there 27 years. Currently working as our small game and wild turkey program manager for the state. So I manage everything from wild turkeys to northern bobwhites to squirrels and rabbits. So
you do the bobble?
I do, yes.
Oh,
yes. Mm-hmm.
So I asked him a while ago. I said one thing I had on my notes that I wanted to ask is what happened to the quail? I mean, we all listen to podcasts and videos, and we hear the stories. Well, pesticides killed them, or well, it's habitat, or no, it's the coyotes, or it's a possum. We don't know, and I don't know if you know, but I said I want to ask you, and you're like, oh yeah, you jumped on it. You're like, yeah, I'll definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
I didn't know you're a biologist for quail
yeah,
too.
Yeah.
Didn't even know we had that.
Yes, indeed. Yep.
Nice.
We don't have very many areas in the state that support strong populations of quail anymore, and it's pretty simple. If you want to get right into that, we can. But in our case, we're not much different than any other southeastern state, and habitat declines have been the primary cause of the issues that we're dealing with northern bobwhites. It's plain and simple. They're a species that needs a real kind of niche kind of habitat, early successional, a lot of disturbance. If you're in the uplands, they need really, really far, open pine stands that get burned very frequently and those sorts of things. If you're in the ag fields, they need rough, nasty, dirty fence rows, dirty turn rows. Not too many of those exist anymore across the state. If you're in the pasture land, you need weedy pasture edges and pastures that have diverse grass species in them. Not much of that exists. Everything's been planted to exotic sod-forming grasses for cattle production. So, if you dive right into it, you could tell pretty quickly that people think the habitat hasn't changed in a lot of cases, but the fact is that change has taken so long to come to fruition that they really haven't recognized how much it has changed, because very, very little quail habitat exists in a sizable tract these days. We've got a couple of good examples on some of our wildlife management areas. One of them is a property that's owned by the Department of Defense. Fort Polk, WMA, is a pretty good example of some good quality quail habitat. And then you've got parts of Kisatchie National Forest that are associated with that area that also have good numbers of quail and are managed, in the right regime to support that. And then we, as a department, we manage a small WMA in southeast Louisiana in Tangipahoa Parish, Sandy Hollow Wildlife Management Area. And it's a good representation and has a pretty strong population of wild bobwhites. And understand, though, that when I say pretty strong population, I'm not talking about the types of bird hunting populations that you hear about in Florida and Georgia around the quail plantations and stuff like that. But these are wild birds that you can go out and hear in the spring and summer, and you have a chance of moving a covey or two on a hunt. When you put your dog down there in the fall and winter.
Just listening to the quail, that's something. Listen to them whistle.
Yep,
man, that's one
of my favorite sounds.
Yeah.
Other than a turkey gobble, I'd have to say it's got to be my favorite.
And that's another thing too. I want to get in and talk about. We have all kind of stuff to talk about, but one thing that I want to get into and ask, in your opinion, what do you think the turkey hunter looks, I guess, most forward to? Hearing a gobble or shooting a bird?
I would say hearing a gobble.
I would think so too.
Yeah. And I wouldn't necessarily say hearing a gobble. It's hearing a gobbler that's doing it right on that particular morning, you know? And that's really what kind of gets me going, is when that, you can tell usually when you hear him off the limb, and you can tell he's in the right mood and he wants to gobble. I love to chase those,
Yeah.
And then you can tell on the other hand, you can tell that bird is going to gobble one or two times and then hit the ground and shut up and really leave you frustrated for the rest of the day, So I'll still chase those too. I just don't quite like them as much.
Those are the ones you kill at 1 or 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, if you're persistent, you kind of come back to them throughout the season, you know, and maybe catch them when they're lonely.
Yeah. We mentioned numbers a while ago, and so we didn't get into it, but we were talking about just the harvest report that you had from 2020, the 2025 season.
Yep.
And you told me that number. I'm about to get you to repeat it, but I was kind of shocked at how high.
So our reported harvest in 2025 was 3,576 birds, which is pretty strong. That's the second highest year since our harvest reporting began in 2009. And, we're really excited about that, and hopefully hope to see that trend maintained and continued, to be increasing like that. You can't expect it to stay on a solid increase forever. Sooner or later, we're going to have some ebbs and flows, maybe some low spots, but we're really hopeful that we can keep it elevated like that, because there was a time where we were pretty dismal. We had gotten down to a low reported harvest of 1,571 birds for that same, for a season back in 2013. So
Jeez.
When you look at it, that's not really that long ago, and we've come a long way. So we're happy about that.
And I wouldn't think that would be the case now. I would think that we used to kill more turkeys back in the day, back in the good old days, so they say.
And that's true. Let me add the caveat that you're correct in thinking that, because the good old days were probably the early 2000s for us. But the issue is we didn't have harvest reporting until 2009. So we had to rely on a mail survey to get a harvest estimate, and we still do that same exact survey. So when we look at that survey, the peak actually occurred around 2004. We just don't have the actual reported harvest. That person kills a turkey and calls it in and validates it to us. We don't have that information except for 2009 to the present. So we don't track it back that far. It wasn't in existence back then.
Do you have an estimated number of what it was in 2024?
Yeah, so just to compare them.
Or not 2024, but 2004?
Yeah, let me put my spectacles on here. So, excuse me, let me back up and correct myself. Our highest estimated harvest was about 11,200 birds in 1997. Just to give you an indication, just past year, based on our estimated harvest in 2025, it estimated 8,400 birds that were harvested. So go on and ask me the obvious question as to why there's such a difference between those two numbers. And I really can't explain that directly, other than the fact that maybe folks are a tad bit more honest on a harvest survey than they are actually reporting those tags, in the field. We do know through whether it's harvest reporting for turkeys or deer, we do know there's a percentage of those animals that go unreported. Folks simply either forget that they're supposed to, or don't do it correctly, or just, do it on purpose, avoid it on purpose. So, as when we're looking at these indexes, we're very hopeful that those trends kind of stay the same over time, because that helps us track our harvest data better. So that's the reason for the discrepancy between what we call an estimated harvest and our reported harvest.
So the reported harvest, that's the one that's a 3,576 or whatever it was for last year. What was it for 2024?
2024, it was the highest year it'd been since 2009, and that came in at 3,695 birds. So within
a small margin, that's tit for tat.
We had a significant change, or a somewhat significant change during that time period too. We went from allowing anyone to harvest jakes, juvenile males, to a prohibition on jake harvest in 2025 that went into effect, where only youths 17 and younger could harvest one as part of their bag limit. So we went from having 434 jakes reported in 2024 to having 111 reported in 2025. So approximately 300 birds. However, interestingly enough, we had more adult turkeys reported in 2025 than we did 2024. So
it makes me think how many people went and harvested an adult turkey and put it on there.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
It is hard to say. But the thing about it is, though, is overall, cutting that jake down to one and letting the youth do that had to have some positive effect to it.
Well, and it's something I believe most hunters wanted, because a lot of the private landowners and people that hunt private properties in their own leases, they were doing it anyway. Typically I was in 2 hunting clubs myself that had a no jake rule, except for kids, the same exact thing that we put forth. So, however, although I think, most people wanted it, I don't think they fully understood what impact it might have or not have on the population, So if you're looking for a huge population shift because we quit shooting jakes, I don't think you're going to see it. And I've got some pretty good banding data to back that up. we've been banding turkeys in this state since really the 90s. But some of our most recent work, we've had a study going on in Kisatchie National Forest and for a few years on some private land in southeast Louisiana. Since 2014, when you look at those numbers, there was about 11% harvest rate on juvenile males that were tagged as part of those studies on the public land. On the private land, I don't think we had a bird reported that we tagged. So it was 0%. So the no Jake rule on private land didn't change a thing.
Right.
And the no Jake rule on public land is only protecting a portion of 10% of your Jake population. So if 90% of them were surviving to be 2-year-olds anyway, now let's say maybe 95% of them are. So when you're looking at that in terms of, hey, how many, broods is that going to put on the landscape, additional turkeys, how's that going to change the reproductive rate for a given year? I don't think it's going to have much of an impact because most juvenile males aren't breeding anyway. So if they're harvested as a 2-year-old, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. So
is it a 4-year-old bird when you call them an adult bird?
No, 2-year-old.
2-year-old.
Once they get to be 2, yes.
Okay. So yeah, all right. Well, that answers my question then. So yep. All right. So habitat wise, what's some healthy parts of the state? I mean, that you look at turkeys all over, and you just got to talk about the southeast areas and even Kisatchie and I know you look at some stuff in the north.
Habitat wise, as far as some of the better areas in the state, it's hard to deny the western part of our state. I'm talking parishes like Vernon, Natchitoches, Sabine. Got a lot of public ground, got a lot of large forested acres. What's not in public ground is usually in timberland of some other sort, industrial ownership or private land ownership. Those types of landscapes are really what turkeys thrive in Louisiana. The more broken up or fragmented it gets, the worse it gets for turkeys. They don't do well in our large agricultural landscapes we've got here simply because the agricultural practices here are not quite the same as they are in Nebraska and Kansas. There's not a lot of waste grain. There's not a lot of appeal to an agricultural field, especially you can see that now if you ride around our state and look at what most row crop fields look like. It's bare dirt and nothing. And there's going to be not much in that, So just kind of think of it in that regard. I'm not saying that's a terrible thing, A farmer has to do what he has to do, but I'm just saying if you expect turkeys to be able to thrive in Louisiana that's not going to happen. You got to have those larger forested, habitats. And the western part of our state has that. So, they support some of the highest numbers. Vernon Parish probably ranks up above the top 3 reported harvest every year. Claiborne Parish in northwest Louisiana up here is another stronghold. You got parts of Kisatchie and a lot of good private land ownerships and a lot of timberland in that area up there too. So where I'm from down in the southeast, I'd love to say we've got some better habitat, but we don't. And we don't have the worst either though, so that's good too. So some of the worst habitat ranking out would be some of our wetter areas along the Mississippi River, up and down the area. We've got 2 of our wild turkey management regions. We call one the Atchafalaya and Lower Miss, and then the North Mississippi Delta, which is up here, covers the Monroe area and south. Those areas continue to struggle, but they have a lot of bottom and hardwood habitat. Those are places that are supposed to be wet, and wet during April, May, and June that's not good. Bode well for wild turkeys. And so we've seen still seeing a lot of struggles in terms of harvest and populations in some parts of those areas for sure. So they haven't recovered, as well as others in the southeast and northwest and western part of Louisiana. So
yeah. So what is like Morehouse and Ouachita? I would assume that Morehouse has pretty good numbers.
Yeah, they do, but you got to remember they're kind of quasi upland, bottomland. They're on that transition zone, to where you've got a lot of that parish that's really good habitat, and then you only got a little bit that's that wide open farmland kind of stuff, East Carroll, obviously, West Carroll, not a lot of forested areas up there.
Yeah.
And the areas that are forested along the Mississippi River were great turkey habitat for many, many years, but we went through a decade where the Mississippi River just stayed above flood stage, and when it wasn't above flood stage, you had above average rainfall in April, May, and June. That just killed any reproduction that could happen, So it really hurt populations along the river there in East Carroll, Madison, Tensas. anywhere on the other side, the east side of the levee. Uh, Now, some of the places, Tensas and Big Lake, they're still got decent populations there. So we're seeing some reproduction there. Other places further south, like Richard K. Yancey, that complex down there, have not recovered, from population declines. So again, that decade from like 2011 to 2021, where you had 9 out of 11 years where the average rainfall was above average from April to June.
Yeah.
In a already wet area, that's not good for wild turkey reproduction. So you typically want to see drought conditions in those zones to be able to have good turkey reproduction, in which we've seen the last couple of breeding seasons, and that's been very encouraging. That's also, helped our harvest numbers. I'm not going to deny that, So you need good conditions there, nesting, brood rearing periods. That's probably more important than any regulation change we could make to get you started, So,
what is?
Good environmental conditions, favorable conditions for nesting and brood rearing,
Brood rearing.
Which in Louisiana is typically dry conditions.
Yeah.
You need something that's not wet.
So we all see turkeys in abundance. They're grouped up.
Mm-hmm.
You say is a flock of turkeys.
Well, yeah.
On while we're hunting or even on trail cameras, it don't matter if it's in Kansas or Texas or here. You see massive numbers of turkeys relative to where you are, but you see a big number, big group of turkeys in October, November, December, and then come and a lot of them are hens. It may be the toms that you see or the jakes. They're all typically grouped together from what I've seen, but Come springtime when you get ready to hunt, those numbers, they dissipate, but also maybe in areas that you were seeing turkeys on your trail cameras, you don't see any turkeys and you don't hear any turkeys there. So what does that transition look like for turkeys, specifically like around here from the fall and winter to springtime?
Yeah, so a lot of times that highlights the differences in the types of habitat that they're using at different times of the year. Wintering habitat, we're learning a little bit more about that than we ever thought, was necessary, because like I mentioned, in some of those landscapes that get really, really fragmented, the hardwood bottoms aren't as vast. They don't provide what they once did. So we're learning that those could be a little more important than we ever gave them credit for. So typically in the fall and winter months, they're going to be in hardwood bottoms, seeking out hard mass. There's not a lot happening in terms of insect availability out in the grasslands, open areas. So they're going to be eating seeds and hard mass and whatever else they can catch. And as they transition, and like you said, they'll be in groups, sex groups at that time. The females will typically all be together. The jakes may be together. Adult males may be together. You may have a little combination of jakes and adult males, or maybe a few jakes are still hanging around with their brood, for leftover from the summer. But you'll definitely see those larger flocks that time of year. But then as we transition and things start to green up and the conditions change, their food sources typically change. They move from being more seed, acorn, nut, mass production type based to more insect based. As things green up, vegetation starts to get lush in the understory of these forested areas or the edges of these open fields or whatever they may be using. And at that same time that's occurring, within the biology of the bird, they're wanting to break up into smaller groups. Gobblers have spent most of the late winter establishing dominance. A lot of turkey hunters, oh man, I've seen a group of turkeys strutting in a field now since January. Man, the season's way too late. They're bred out already. They're not breeding. They're figuring out who's going to do the breeding. They're establishing that dominance. And sometimes, it'll be one turkey that does the majority of the strutting behavior. Sometimes there'll be 3 turkeys all the time that's strutting, and it's really hard to tell which one is the dominant until you see him mount a hen, So it's very complex the way their social groups work and interact. And, we kind of known that about males over the years, but we're learning that, hey, that's pretty complex in females too. Dr. Brett Collier with LSU has done some good work on social behavior and dominance within females and how that affects their breeding and timing of the breeding of their the flocks they're associated with. Got some good research out on that. But anyway, back to your point about the transition and what's happening. So so they're wanting to break up into smaller units in order to get those better breeding opportunities. I guess if you could put it, going into the springtime. So that's why you see the larger flocks break down into smaller flocks, and then ultimately end up into what we know when we see them during turkey season is usually a gobbler who's got 15 hens, or there may be two gobblers over here by themselves. It's just it runs the gamut. You're likely to encounter a group of 3 or 4 hens alone, a single hen alone that may have been an early breeder, and so, but anyway, it also has to do with what they're using on the landscape. They typically go to more of those places that have understory vegetation that has the structure to support the insects they're utilizing for food. They're super high in protein, and they need those calories every day to keep going, so that's what they're after. And they're chasing down. Turkeys eat everything. I kind of mentioned it from grass and forward parts to nuts, fruits, berries, whatever they can get in their mouth, basically, whatever insects they can catch, small reptiles. We've seen them eat snakes and crawfish, small crustaceans, just you name it. They'll try to eat it if they can catch it. So, but anyway, so as breeding happens, typically, those flocks get smaller and smaller. Single hens break off and go to nesting. And when that's happening, that's hopefully happening in some of your higher sites, out of the threat for flooding and things like that, the uplands, and that's got relatively decent cover vegetation to protect that hen while she's on the nest. A lot of times if some properties are void of the adequate nesting and brood rearing cover, it may be very limited, which makes it easier for predators to hone in on what they're doing and when, and may cause, nests to fail at higher rates, so habitat plays a big part of the nesting and brood rearing process, but once a hen hatches out, she's typically if she's successful, she'll keep that brood with her. She's going to stay in that tight-knit little group. She may pick up another hen that was either by herself or lost her brood, or maybe only have a couple poults. So you may see 2 or 3 hens in a group. Never going to see really 5 hens with 100 poults. That doesn't happen. They stay more isolated to themselves throughout the summer months. And then the process kind of starts over it's similar, I guess you could describe it similar to a fall shuffle for quail, where a lot of the juveniles are doing most of the dispersing, across the landscape to keep that genetic flow, happening out there. You don't want them to be staying close to home, or like we were talking about earlier with genetics, you end up in situations where it may not be ideal in long term, for viability. But so yeah, they're usually shuffling around. We've got a little knowledge gap on exactly what happens and where and how far a lot of juvenile hens go. We can kind of track the juvenile males because our hunters see them during bow season, grouped up as jakes. They see them all throughout the hunting season. Deer season, they're seeing a group of 5 jakes running the place. Pretty obvious where they are, but you can't really tell the juvenile hens from the regular hens. So are we seeing that same group of 5 hens that are all juveniles, or is it 1 or 2 juveniles with a larger group of adults? That's how we usually catch them when we're doing our research work in January through March. When we catch a group or a flock of turkeys or hens, especially, let's say it's anywhere from 4 hens up to 15 hens, no more than 10% of that is going to be a juvenile. So it's kind of eye-opening to me that we're not catching a lot of juvenile hens in our research flocks. So what are they doing? Are there groups out there that we're not getting on bait? Because turkeys are, when you start watching, especially we watch them pretty hard as we're working through this process of catching the birds we need for various research projects throughout the year. We're monitoring cameras and checking bait, and you get a group of gobblers on bait, you better catch them because nothing else is coming until you get them caught. It's just like, a big mature buck or something finds your set or your feeder, he'll keep everything run off of it. Same scenario. So is that happening with regards to females as well? I don't know. So it's a complex ordeal that, we still have a lot to learn. I wish I could tell you a lot more because I feel like, after all the work a lot of folks have done over the decades, that we really should know a lot more about this bird than we do, but it's tough. They're not easy to study. A lot of our work that we do regulation wise, we have to rely on things like harvest data and estimates and hunter estimates because we don't have reliable means of estimating population. they're not like waterfowl. We can't just fly surveys and count them when they're here. They don't leave a lot of evidence on the landscape. So a browse survey like we do for deer, to give us an index whether you have a high deer population or a low deer population, you look at the pressure they're putting on the habitat. Well, you can't do that with turkeys and discern much of anything because they don't leave a lot of evidence on the landscape that they're even there sometimes. So it's a challenge to really come up with viable ways to estimate population other than what we've used over the years, which are our harvest indexes, that I've talked about earlier, the estimated harvest, the reported harvest. And you compare that back to your effort. You got to have some track of effort too when you're talking harvest. And for us, that's estimated hunter numbers. Those have remained relatively constant. They've fluctuated up and down a little bit, but for the most part, remain relatively constant in our state.
What is that number?
So just to throw out a little, just for comparison, like we talked about earlier, back in, let's say, 2013, when we had our record low reported harvest, we had an estimated 24,500 turkey hunters in the state. In 2018 or 2017, before we made the season delay change, we had 22,500. That dipped a little bit to 16,900 in 2018, which importantly, the harvest remained pretty constant. And then now in 24 and 25, respectively, we've had 22,300 turkey hunter estimated and 22,000 turkey hunters estimated. So, right there around that just over 20,000 mark. So
that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, for hunters and just because they say the squeaky wheel gets us higher.
Right.
And so,
something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Or no, it's not the squeaky wheel gets higher. Squeaky wheel gets the oil or the grease, whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, that's good. You want to have hunters.
Yeah, absolutely. But importantly, you don't want to see that number balloon up, which is then driving your harvest up, just because you had a huge increase in hunter numbers, right? Our effort out there. So what we can tell off of the data that we've got, our hunter effort has stayed relatively constant, but yet our harvest has gone up. So what does that translate to?
More birds.
More birds on the landscape, and that's what we're looking for. That's what we're trying to get at. And, we made a pretty significant adjustment to our turkey season starting in 2018, where we delayed the season start by 1 week just to allow more breeding opportunity. We didn't have a ton of data to say, hey, this is exactly what we need to do, but felt like based on the biology of the bird that it would behoove us to give a little bit extra opportunity to hopefully get some more nests on the ground. That was the whole goal at that time, So we watched that for a few years. Of course, we took a good bit of flack over it in the beginning, as you could imagine. You would think, let me clarify that. It's not always a 1 week adjustment. Some years it's a 2 week adjustment because we moved it from the fourth Saturday in March to the first Saturday in April. Well, some years March has 5 Saturdays, and on those years it's a 2 week season adjustment from where it would have opened. So, but just to keep the consistency, that we kept it with a fourth Saturday to the first Saturday in April. So anyway, we watched it close, and over time, our harvest, it did not dip very much. It kind of hovered for about 3 or 4 years at about the same rate. And then we saw an uptick in 2022, actually. It went up about 40% to 2,846 birds. We said, hey, that's nice. Something might happen. It stayed there the next year, really close to there. It was only off like a dozen birds or something. And then in 2024, it made another significant jump. And we're like, oh, yeah, this is good. It's what we want to see. So it took a few years, in my opinion, for that regulation change to fully take effect. But, and not only was it a good thing to do at that time, but if you look back over the last 3 nesting seasons, we've had pretty good weather during the nesting and brood rearing period. And when I say good weather, I mean dry weather.
Right.
So that's important. That's definitely important. And when you align those two factors, good environmental conditions and the change we made, I think we're seeing the fruits of it right now.
So what you're saying is really good turkey habitat means pretty poor duck habitat is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you want to be a good turkey hunter.
Well, fortunately in our state, they don't typically cross paths that much. They're usually in very different areas,
Oh, yeah, I'm just referring to, I guess the point was that, of me saying that is, We've had low duck numbers is what it appears, and a lot of the hunters, that's what they complain about is, well, we don't have enough water.
Right.
And I don't know whether we do or not. I just know that it appears that you just drive through. here in Marouge or Jones or anywhere else, and we have less water than even the public ground here. It's there's places I used to go out in public ground with a regular outboard, and you're not doing that. In some of those places, you're not getting there at all, even with a mud motor. And so, completely different topic. But speaking of complaining, when you hear hunters complain, do you hear them complain on something more than pushing the season back? Like you said a while ago, well, they're already bred out. They're done gobbling by the time turkey season. I mean, we've heard that. So I guess what are your comments on that, or is there another complaint bigger than that?
Well, I mean, I could tell you I've heard a vast variety of opinions. I don't want to call everything a complaint, so I mean, I've heard it all, and I tease people because a lot of time I don't want to say tease people, but people that know me have heard me say this before. I have literally heard from landowners who own property directly across the road from one another that, hey, man, the season delay was the best thing y'all ever did. I just had the best season of my life. And the guy across the road, same year, man, this has been the worst thing, you've done. What have you done? I mean, I can't go hear a turkey anywhere on my property. And it just speaks to the variability that's out there on any given morning in the turkey woods, how turkeys are using a given area from one day to the next month to the next year. Stuff changes. It's nothing dynamic out there. Just because you may have a lot of turkeys on your property, in 2013 doesn't mean you're going to have a lot of turkeys on your property in 2018. Something's going to change. Something might change around you. You got to always kind of be assessing things and how dynamic the environment that we're living in, the landscape is. A few aggressive timber harvests in the wrong place can really mess up your property, even though nothing's changed on your property. So, I get that a lot, and I try to take on those challenges and go look at each landowner's property and say, hey, let's look for the limiting factors. It may be something you got control over. It may be something totally out of your wheelhouse you can't do anything about. But I also hear, like you said, that, like I mentioned earlier, people were in the beginning were very concerned that turkeys wouldn't be gobbling anymore by the time our season opened. And we've got a lot of data to back up. There's been an advancement with regard to gobble surveys and stuff all across the Southeast. And in every study that's been done, we've used autonomous recording units is the actual term for it, ARUs, where we place these out. They're recording at a set time every day. We don't actually have to go listen. And then we have software that can analyze that data and then text within the lab to check it. When they say they heard a gobble, let's check and make sure that's a gobble and, for accuracy. So anyway, results of those studies have pretty clearly shown that in the Southeast, turkey gobbling activity roughly peaks the day before turkey season, no matter when turkey season opens. So take that for what you will.
How is that?
Well, it's because pressure comes in a lot of different forms. It's not just harvesting the turkey. It's 20,000 hunters hitting the woods on April the 3rd, 2026. That's going to change, those day-to-day activities those birds have been accustomed to for the last 2 weeks or whatever.
So that's
beforehand.
What you're saying is the turkey. It's just like a deer. It's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter instead of steady.
Granted, we have very few unhunted populations to study. Mike Chamberlain is working on one in South Carolina. It's called the Savannah River Site. It's got very light lottery type youth hunting only. I think may not be restricted youth, but very, very light hunting. Essentially a non-hunted population. And he's got gobbling survey data on it as well. And there is obviously a peak where it slows down, but it's usually much later on into the breeding process than the start of our turkey season. So while I don't disagree that, because look, I'm an avid turkey hunter myself, and I know how things can be. This time of year, you can go out mid-March, third week of March, and really listen out there. And there's going to be mornings where every bird in the woods gobbles. But you can go the very next morning and nothing gobbles. It's not very consistent, and it doesn't get to be very consistent really ever. That's one thing we're kind of learning too. Individual birds act different, depending on pressure and just how they approach a breeding season. Sometimes they gobble a lot. Sometimes they don't gobble at all. Sometimes that's a great weather day. Sometimes it's a crappy weather day. So yeah, I like the good, cool, crisp mornings because it makes me feel like I got a better chance. But looking at the research, you don't always have a better chance, you know? So it's kind of haphazardly how it happens, if it makes sense. But overall, when you're looking at the peaks, we did a gobble survey in Louisiana probably up till like 2008, I want to say. And ours showed, this was actual survey that was done by men on the ground, running routes on some of our WMAs and some private lands throughout the state. And we could pretty much show the same thing, the peak occurring immediately prior to turkey season. But what we didn't have was the ability to keep running that survey and pick up gobbling activity on the middle of turkey season. And that's what the ARUs will give you. You'll see a second peak, if you will, or more gobbling activity ramp back up. And while that is a little bit of pressure leaving the woods, after that first or second week, and things are lightening up. And it's a difference in where they are in the breeding cycle. More hens are receptive. If more hens are receptive, guess what? More gobblers are going to be looking, right? Yeah. That's the whole point.
So what does that breeding process look like? We all know on deer, we all know what it looks like on deer, but on turkeys, that's something I'd like to learn more about. So,
and you talking about in terms of what triggers we're looking for?
So like in whitetail specifically, keep bringing that up, but in whitetail you have the pre-rut, and then you got the rut. But even during that rut, we got some buddies that hunt up in Kansas with us, and a couple of us will be up there or even down here, and we get a text like, dude, it's on. I sat today and I saw a lot of big deer chasing and lockdown with does, and you got those 2, 3 days, 4 days. It's like everybody in that area within 50 miles there is hot. Mm-hmm. So do you have something like that when it comes to turkeys?
I think you do, but I think it varies depending on where you are. And like I said, where each group of turkeys are within that breeding cycle, if you will. What primarily determines a breeding cycle for a hen is the length of the day. They've got glands that enable them to sense how many daylight hours we have. And when they reach a certain threshold, that triggers them to have a reproductive cycle. That triggers them to squat for our gobbler. And the gobbler finally, he's been strutting since January. Now he gets his opportunity, right? So that's typically the way it works. Yeah, weather can move it a day or two if it's nice. We've had a warm spring this year, or a warm winter, early green up. People are like, well, turkeys breed early. Yeah, well, some turkeys breed early every year, regardless of when green up is. It's a bell-shaped curve. You're always going to have early breeders, and the process is going to ramp up and peak out. For us in Louisiana, we've got a lot of data to show from our research birds. The peak initiation, which is the day that hen lays her first egg, right, which is very closely related to the peak of breeding, because she's got to get bred to go lay that first egg, right, is around April the 9th and has been for years. It moves a little bit on the average, maybe up to April the 7th or back to April the 11th. But if you had to pick a day and say, Cody, what day is it? I'd tell you April the 9th. It's popped up more than often than not.
From them getting bred.
So not telling you that there's not breeding happening right now. Don't misconstrue that, because it's a bell-shaped curve. There's always going to be a few early birds. And it's been proven that the early nests are somewhat more successful, especially more successful than the really late nests that are on the tail end of that bell-shaped curve. Environmental conditions are much different in starting a nest in May than they are starting a nest in April, the beginning of April, right? Yeah. So temperatures are harder to regulate, incubation, just different vegetative types and structures and covers, and a whole host of things have changed, in that short period of time. So a lot of data shows that the earlier a hen nests, the better chance she has of successful nest, right? So we want our turkeys to nest a little bit earlier, and that's another result that we're working on getting the analysis done on some of our data. And the Kisatchie project that I mentioned earlier, see, we've got data from Kisatchie from 2014 to now, basically. We just finished our last field season of catching birds in February over there, or early March, should I say. And so we've got basically 5 years of data prior to the season change that we made, the delay of our start of our season. And then we've got more data after that. So what we're working on now is comparing our nesting ecology data with all the hens we had. Granted, not all the conditions were the same across those different years, but we can look at things like nest initiation date. When did it peak, prior to the season change, and when did it peak after? So if the season change would have had any kind of positive effect, you would have seen that date move earlier, right?
So what about, again, you're a turkey hunter. If that April 9th, say that is on average for Louisiana birds, and correct me if I'm wrong here, if I heard you wrong.
Yeah.
What is it?
Oh, you were asking me a question about how it relates to deer and what's going on with the pre-rut. I don't think I adequately got there with you.
You may not have.
Turkey.
Feel free. Yeah.
But what I was going to
that's going in my next question. And I'll shut up and let you talk. But that's my next thing is like trying to hunt birds, because the way you hunt deer pre-rut, then the rut, and even post-rut's different.
Right.
Well, how many people are going out there and they're calling it birds the same way they are pre-nest initiation, or I guess their peak being bred or whatever, versus that when it's on fire, versus even after there's very few hens out there.
Yeah.
So that's where I was going into, which goes right back into what you're talking about.
Exactly.
So proceed, please.
What I was going to tell you is, so looking at it at that early phase of the season where gobblers may still be in a group, together, and they're actively seeking out hen flocks to hang around with, Yeah, I mean, you can get a lot of receptive groups, that come right to the call and commit suicide, if you will, But then again, if they've already found that hen flock and they're with them all day, they're going to be non-responsive. They're going to be, gobbling nil. I mean, I just came from a hunt from the south zone of Texas where, I'm looking at a field of 12 strutting turkeys with 50 plus hens in it, right? And we didn't hear but 2 gobbles on the limb. And from daylight to 12, we might have heard 10 gobbles, So not no reason to gobble when you've got that happening on, at that stage of the. So what I'm getting at is that could be in some ways considered your pre-rut if you catch them early enough to where they haven't found what hen flocks they want to hang out. They really hadn't found their kind of area yet. And you make a couple yelps and they come charging in. Yeah, that's good. But for me, and then, of course, as they get with hens, they get less receptive to call, and your tactics have to change. You got to get lighter, use more woodsmanship, get where they want to go, that sort of thing, and expect them to be non-responsive. Just expect them not to come when you call. They may gobble, because they want you to come over there with them too. Right. They don't mind taking on a few more, but expect them not to leave that flock and just change your tactics in terms of hunting and be moving more with the turkeys and keeping up with things. A lot of times you can use, the hens vocalizations to do that just as easy as you can. The gobblers, depending on what's happening. If you got a hen that's in the flock and wants to answer you every time, gobbler may gobble every 5th time you call, still good enough to hang with them and see where they're headed, So you got that phase where they're not very responsive. But my favorite time to hunt, which to me would be like the pre-rut, like the like you're talking about for deer, that for us in our area, that's going to be the week before Christmas, when they're really cruising. The bucks are, I'm not a big deer hunter, but I got friends that are, so I can speak a little bit of the lingo. I mean, to me, it's just a woods goat, But so yeah, that pre-rut for me occurs at the end of turkey season, because it typically applies to when that critter is more susceptible to harvest for me. And when you get those gobblers that have been with hens all season, and all of a sudden they look around at 8 o'clock and ain't nothing around them, everything's gone to nest, then to me, that's the best hunt you could have. That's the best time to be in the woods, Yeah, the weather may not be great. It's probably going to be hot, and it's going to be bugs out, but geez, on Pete's, that can be good about 9:30 or 10 o'clock, And so I wouldn't trade that for much of anything.
So when does our season open here?
April 3rd this year, Good Friday.
Okay,
so
when does it close?
It'll close May the 3rd. For Area A, Area B closes a week earlier. Area C closes 2 weeks sooner, so in April the 19th.
Yeah.
So our youth weekend is coming up, the 28th and 29th, so people will be glad about that. Hopefully the weather will hold. And the last 2 youth weekends have been pretty poor in terms of weather. Harvest has still been pretty decent. And again, I think that's just because the way the timing is in the breeding cycle, things, you hit it good in places, you hit it bad in others, but as long as it's not raining like it was last year on Saturday Youth Week, I think it was raining most of the state, because I usually go and help, and we still have a couple of WMA or AWMA that we do a guided youth hunt on. That's a lottery, and it's on Fort Polk WMA over there. So I go get recruited. Those guys give me a tremendous amount of help throughout the trapping season. Trying to get our birds captured. I'm talking about our technician staff, and they never get enough credit for what it is they do. And I'm talking about our Lake Charles staff over there, and our staff all across the state, wherever we might be catching turkeys, because I'm a program of one here. I don't have any staff. So if work needs to be done and I can't do it, I got to find somebody to help me, you know. So, and those guys answer the call a lot. So I'm appreciative of what they do, and they also do a good job. They've always put on a nice youth hunt over there. They try to work closely with the Army, the Department of War over there to get access to some places that may or may not have been open otherwise. And we take kids out. You usually take some years we take 10, some years we take 20, just depending on how many military kids put in for the draw. And we try to have a good time, show them a good time, give them a good turkey hunt, feed them a lunch, you know, and talk about things afterwards. And they get a goodie bag of gifts from, you know, we've got some NWTF sponsors, some local sponsors that help out, and just a good time.
Yeah.
All around. But anyway, that's what I'll be doing this weekend. So
it sounds fun.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. It really is. So
did you kill in Texas this past weekend?
I did. We had some good luck.
Did you pull all 4 of them?
No. I didn't go that wild, but no, I got a couple birds, and my hunting partner got a bird too. So we had a good time. So
nice.
Yeah. And then I live in Southeast Louisiana, so I've got access to parts of Mississippi that I hunt too as well. You know, I hunt a lot of public land there, Homachita National Forest, and I also have a lease over there, a small lease that I go to as well to hunt as well. So I enjoy turkey hunting, and I try to make the season last as long as possible. So if Florida wouldn't have changed their regulations this year, I'd have been over there for the first part of March, you know. So, but they've, like a lot of states, are starting to kind of tighten down on what non-residents are allowed to do on certain public lands and places like that. And, you know, I don't blame them. I don't fault them. Let me first say I don't manage turkeys in those states. I'm a sportsman over there, you know, but I am a paying sportsman on typically federal lands. So I don't really like the fact that y'all are trying to kick us all out, you know. Maybe let some of us go, give us a lottery or something like that. But, you know, it is what it is. I don't want to fault anybody there. Obviously, we're trying to respond to some type of population shift or change that they've seen, and they feel like, you know, a lot of states have lowered. I mean, we were talking earlier about Kansas. A lot of states have lowered the bag limit and made them draws, and they're trying to be responsive, I think, to some of the changes in their harvest that they've seen over time and populations. And I certainly won't fault any agency for doing that. I just, you know, I don't know the full details as to what ins and outs of what makes that happen. Mississippi a couple of years back had done the same thing on some of their national forests. You know, you have to draw for the first 2 weeks if you're a non-resident now. So, and I did not draw this year, so I'm waiting till next week, but I've got some time off scheduled. So hopefully I'll better get out there and hit the woods.
Mm-hmm. So how long have you been turkey hunting?
So I started turkey hunting when I was 13. So I'm 49 now. You have to do the math for me on that one.
But it's been a minute.
Yeah.
What
So interestingly enough, nobody in my family, my immediate family, turkey hunted. I had an uncle that turkey hunted, and this tells you how turkey hunting was back in the day. It's not like this anymore. I had no idea he turkey hunted until I had been turkey hunting about 5 years. So
he was quiet.
He was very quiet, very, very reserved, and we were in the same hunting club. So that's how it went. But no, I was lucky enough when I was a young teenager. My dad, bless his heart, I love my dad to death, and he exposed me to all kinds of good things. You know, we grew up duck hunting on Lake Marpaw. We had a camp at Blind River, and, you know, we saw it in its heyday. I can remember what it was like, and I'm thankful for that every day, you know, that I wake up. But he never turkey hunted, and I took him on his first turkey hunt. That tells you when I was a older teenager. So yeah, I got exposed through my grandpa used to have a camp back in our lease there at South Livingston Parish on some timber company land. It started out Cavenham, now it's Weyerhaeuser property, and so he was one of the founding members of the hunting club. So I got to hang out with Pawpaw quite a bit, you know, and Mom would drop me off, of course, at different periods throughout the season. We were rabbit hunting. You know, we didn't deer hunt a whole lot. We ran dogs a lot, rabbit hunting. My uncle's coon hunted. We did that at night and stuff like that. But one year, my mom dropped me off for spring break. Me and Pawpaw were going to stay at the camp, and so we did that. And I got interested in seeing some of the guys come and go. I'm like, Papa, what are they hunting? He's like, oh, they're turkey hunting, and one of the guys was nice enough to take me, and I'll name him. His name was Glenn Forbes. I'll never forget him for doing it. But he took me and my cousin that same season, not the same week, but he took us that same season, and we each killed our first birds, and I've been hooked ever since. So he introduced me to the fix, if you will.
Yeah. What'd you shoot him with?
I was shooting an 870, a Remington Wingmaster at the time. My dad had got it for me when I was 12. Mom and Dad had given it to me. Can't remember if it was a birthday present or Christmas, but it was one of the old Remington Wingmasters. It was new at the time, so it was real steel gun. It was nice. It's nice. Still got the gun today, but it shined and it looked like he was holding a mirror in the woods, with the bluing that was on it and the chrome bolt and everything. I wouldn't dare use something like that today, but it was effective. I enjoyed it. So hunted with it for years, and then eventually got. My wife got me the turkey gun that I have now. The second year we were married, so it's a same gun, 870, except it was a Super Magnum, the 3.5 inch. They came out with it in 1998, I think. And she got me that shotgun. I wanted to duck hunt with it, but it didn't take me long figuring out that 3.5 inch shells and duck hunting was not going to work. So I made a turkey gun out of it and been hunting with it ever since. And of course, I recently got on the 20 gauge kick like everybody has, but I hadn't started carrying it religiously yet. I still carry the 12 gauge, so until I figure my shoulder and my body can't take it no more. So, but. Anyway, so yeah, that's it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a little bit different path to turkey hunting than most kids take, growing up with their dad turkey hunting and stuff. But I just became obsessed with it and tried to learn as much as I could. And back then, pre-YouTube, pre-anything, you had to just glean information from anybody you could, I mean, about the second or I would say third year I hunted. Of course, by then, all of our buddies on the lease, they were of the opinion, thank them for this, because this is what I do, kids nowadays. I don't cradle them. You coming on a turkey hunt, we're going to go on a turkey hunt. Wherever he gobbles, that's where we're going. And you got one or two chances you kill a turkey, that's it. It's on you next time to get your second bird. I showed you how, and that's what Glenn had done for us growing up, and it stuck with me. I don't think it stuck as much with my cousin because he doesn't hardly hunt anymore, but turkey hunts. But anyway, so I'm on my own now. I've been kicked out, and sorry.
You're good. Hey, they're tough. You can beat it to death.
So I've killed the Jake. I killed the first year, and I think I killed actually another Jake by myself that year. I know I did. And then so I'm like year 3, and hadn't killed nothing the second year, and I'm looking for that first longbeard. I'm like, man, I can't wait for Easter break to get here, Mom. By this time, I'm driving now. That's the difference. I'm starting to drive my own vehicle. I can come and go where I want to. So I finally get off of school and go down there, and I checked the pipeline one afternoon on the way home from baseball practice, and there was a gobbler just blowed up. Man, he looked like a Volkswagen down there with some hens. I was like, golly, that's going to be good. That's going to be good. All right, that'll work. So he made it through the first weekend. I had a ball tournament or something. That's what I learned really early on too. Is
you
baseball.
Didn't like ball very much, did you?
Well, I mean, I like ball. Don't get me wrong. I like playing ball, and at the time I didn't appreciate my time playing baseball as much as I should have. But baseball and turkey hunting, it kind of don't mix. Too good. You gotta really be careful. But anyway, so I'm coming home from ball practice, see the turkey. And I can't wait to get back. But the problem is I got a ball tournament that weekend. I can't hunt the Saturday, Sunday. And it wasn't the opening of the season, but it was like first couple of weeks of the season. But when spring break fell, well, I'm ready to go Monday. I show up. My bird's still there. You see, I seen him one evening, got a bunch of hens, and I'm making moves, in my head, trying to figure this out and where to go and where to get. Long story short, day 4 of fooling with this turkey. Now it's Friday or Thursday or something. I'm so frustrated. I can't figure him out. Can't get ahead of it. Every move I make is wrong, and yada, yada, yada. Now I got to go. We had to go play another tournament coming up that Saturday. I was going to be free to come back Sunday, and yada, yada. And then I think it was going to rain or something. Everybody was mad. But anyway, when I left there that Friday, I was so mad. I was like, and my uncle, who I told you I really didn't know turkey hunted, I knew maybe it wasn't 5 years, but I didn't figure it out till after I started turkey hunting. And I was like, Uncle Bo, I said, man, I've been fooling with this turkey down here on the pipeline. You gonna have to go do something. Let me know what I need. What am I doing wrong? And I told him all about it. And you might need to do this, might need to do that, Well, a few days went by and I couldn't come back till that Sunday. And when I went up there, I got up there good and early and was going to get to the spot where he normally roosts, and all that. And I walked out there and got set up, sat down. Figured something was off because wasn't no turkey gobbling. Waited. I said, well, maybe he just ain't gobbled this morning. So waited. Nothing ever happened. Few hens flew. I heard them cut up on the pipeline. They started coming out. I said, well, it's going to happen now. No gobbler ever showed up. God dang. So hens come and went, morning come and went. So I got up and just doing a little scouting like I would always do, look for some tracks and stuff. And I found some tracks and looking around. This is how naive I was now. I mean, I was green, So I looked down that pipeline and there was big old pile of black feathers, gobbler. Daggum, man. Something done got my gobbler. What in the world? Looking around, there's a lot of smaller feathers and very few large feathers. Like what I know now, if a coyote catches a bird, there's going to be
big
all kinds of feathers everywhere. A hunter shoots a bird, it's going to be a lot of small cut feathers.
Uncle Bo
everywhere. So anyway, that was on Sunday. I caught up with Uncle Bo about Wednesday evening or something when I was coming back there. It's like, Uncle Bo, I said, I don't know, something done caught my gobbler up there. Something done happened to us. I said, all I found was a big old pile of feathers. I said, what you reckon caught him? He's like, well, son, I don't know. I don't know. Oh, hell, I can't lie to you. That's number 6 has done that to him, son. I killed him up there Saturday. So, lesson learned.
Dang it, Uncle Bo. I bet you never told that sorry sapsucker where that turkey's gobbling again.
I couldn't hold it against him because he put us on. After that, we got to be pretty good turkey hunting buddies, and we got to sharing a little more information. I think he felt like he owed me,
Yeah, that's probably good.
So, yeah, it turned out to be a good thing in the end. But yeah, he just grinned and said, I think that's number 6 has done that, son.
Number 6s.
Yeah. But anyway, that's all. Got off on a tangent telling a turkey story.
No, you're good. So you haven't shot one with a 20 gauge yet?
Oh, I've killed 2 with it, yeah. But I haven't picked it up, committed to carry it.
Yeah. You shooting TSS out of them?
Oh yeah.
Man,
everything.
Yeah, I got a little automatic 20 gauge. I call it, we call them youth models. These days they're called compacts, but I got a little youth model automatic 20 gauge. And I got it from my wife to dove hunt with or whatever we wanted to. And of course, she shot it a small handful of times. And so I said, you know what? It had the little screws on top so I could put a little pick rail on it. I was like, I'm about to put me a red dot on this son of a gun. And instead of me carrying that, I used to hunt with a SP10, a Remington.
Oh, yeah, that's a heavy gun.
Let me tell you something.
My friend used to hunt with it all the time.
Yeah, and that's what, that's what all the old wise guys would duck. Not old, but that's what the true duck hunters, growing up, us watching, me growing up watching all the real guys duck hunt, that's what they all shot was that 3.5 inch, those brown estates or heavy metals, whatever, the brown shell, 3.5 inch BB out of those 10 gauges, SP10s. So anyhow, I got one and, of course, duck and goose hunted with it. I still got it in my safe. I ain't shot it in a couple of years, but I got tired of carrying that. So then I was like, I'm gonna start shooting that Benelli more. And so I started hunting with it and started killing some birds with it. I'm like, man, I wasn't shooting TSS. I was like, dude, those long beards or those Nitro Express, they will hurt you. I mean, they will paralyze that shoulder. And especially if you shoot one and you try to follow up again, it's like, I don't want to do that anymore. And so I went and picked up my wife's 20 gauge. Put a little Holosun red dot with a solar panel on it.
That's what I got on mine.
And it's short. I mean, I'm telling you, it ain't as long. It ain't a whole lot longer than what this boom right here is. And anyhow, I got that real tight 5.55 choke in it, and running those 7.89 blends TSS. Dude, it is nasty. I mean, 50 something yards. I've killed multiple birds over 50 with it.
TSS has been a game changer, in terms of pattern, density, and just knockdown out there because. That's why everybody's doing it, going to the sub gauges and stuff. And just because you could kill a turkey as dead with that as you used to have to have a 12 gauge 3.5 to do, So, but like I said, I like to know that I have whatever's the most effective in my gun. I'm not quote unquote traditionalist. I still want to get the turkey well within range, but sometimes you make a mistake, especially hunting open habitats. You misjudge the distance or something like that. You like to know you got your best opportunity that's in that barrel.
That's when you grab that 22 mag.
No, you can't do all that. No, not down
I thought
here.
that was that new rule here in Louisiana.
No, they hadn't gotten that liberal yet. It wasn't like Texas or
I go back and ask Uncle Bo. He ever shot one with a
Uncle Bo. I don't know. He was a traditionalist. Now
he may have had something beside the number 6s that got him a turkey time or two.
Yeah,
ain't no telling.
Yeah.
Look, we were talking about the DNA, or you mentioned earlier the DNA. What all do you know about some? I know this is pretty new, but the DNA tests are doing on turkeys, looking at if they're actual wild turkeys, heritage turkeys. I don't know a whole lot about it, but they're essentially, and we talked about it briefly, but is it Chamberlain?
Yeah, Dr. Mike Chamberlain is heading up that work in conjunction with some other folks out of Georgia over there, where they're analyzing DNA. He's doing a lot of the genetics work in general in association with SCWDIS, the Southeast Cooperative Disease. I might have mislabeled that acronym, but the group that handles all of our disease samples and things, they also do some genetics work and things like that, related stuff. And they've had some students come through the ranks that are capable doing analyzing genetics projects and things like that. So we've filled them up. And so we've provided Dr. Chamberlain with genetic samples for years now. Like I said, we've had the long-running project in Kisatchie. He's got genetic samples from western Louisiana. He's got genetic samples from southeastern Louisiana on hens and males that were live and walking around, on the landscape. So that's one way he was getting a lot of genetics information. And there's a lot of hopes for different parts of genetics in the future. There may be some applicability in terms of population estimation to come down the pipe from genetic sampling, like a lot of other species are headed towards. We don't really know. We're going to see. Obviously, the disease monitoring portion of that is very important, when it comes to tracking anything new that may be in the populations. But with regard specifically to your DNA work, he approached us last year and was interested in collecting samples from various color phase birds. There's always been a lot of concern or worry or confusion about various color phase birds. They're so coveted in parts of our country by our hunters and things like that. You see a white phase or a gray phase or any kind of bronze. They treat those as, that upper echelon trophy type bird. But the question remains is it truly a wild turkey, or is that some part of a domestic bird that was, bred over time, and this trait is just now showing up in the population as a result of the early restocking efforts where they turned loose a lot of pen-raised birds and only a few of them survived and intermixed? Is it, a result of something else? People bringing pen-raised birds into our wild populations, that's a concern I have.
You still have that today? You think
I think
people are
so.
still doing that?
We try to track. I usually get some different reports of birds being in places that birds are not normally, and they behave not like wild turkeys. And it's very concerning to me that a lot of folks are trying to restock their own areas with pen-raised birds, and it's simply not going to work. Those birds aren't, just like restocking quail with pen-raised birds. Those birds are not raised to avoid predators like they need to be in order to survive on the landscape. Number one concern. Number two concern is you don't know the lineage and you don't know where they came from actually. So what are you putting on the landscape that could impact potential for having wild birds, in that wild flock? So that's a whole nother concern with regard to disease and things like that. But back to Dr. Chamberlain's work, he asked us to give samples for various color phase birds that we had, and we had actually captured a couple of white phase hens and provided him feather samples and blood samples for that. And I know he was getting a lot of information from hunter harvested birds as well on the various color phases. So as you imagine, all males. So the data he's getting on hens, I think, is important to him, and we're going to still keep providing him whatever he requests. He was using a subset of our normal data anyway, so not just the color phase hens. So, but So anyway, he's expanding that from what I understand. He talked to me a while back, and he's interested in expanding that not only in Louisiana, but other parts of other states as well. So what he's looking for specifically in Louisiana is hunters to sign up and be agreeable to provide samples in North Louisiana, Southeast Louisiana, and Northwest Louisiana. And because we've got a pretty good subset of samples for Western Louisiana, Kisatchie and things like that. So not to say nobody shouldn't sign up from over there, but if you're interested, you could go there. You got the website.
Yeah, I got it. It's Wild Turkey DNA, and you just type that in, wildturkeydna.com, and the homepage is at the very top. Says register to participate.
And I think what they do is they don't have enough sample kits to send to, I don't think, every person that registers. So they look at you by location and things and select those, a subset of those, and you'll get a sample kit. And from what I know of the sample kit, you got to cut off a piece of the gobbler's tongue, and there may be something else, maybe a little blood swath or something that you provide them as well, and send that back to them wherever you hunt. As long as, it doesn't have to be, he wants your sample. If you go like I did to Texas and you're able to collect a sample over there and you've got kits, he'll take those as well, just label them as such, from where they came from. But he's primarily worried about getting some more birds from different parts of Louisiana. He's doing this in other states too. And to help funding for the effort, he's solicited some funds from the NWTF state chapter here in Louisiana, and they're looking like they're going to provide some funding to help support the data analysis on those samples.
Yeah. So, well, when Jordan Summit, when he told me about this not all that long ago, he's like, dude, he said, because he knew this podcast was coming up. I've been excited about it for a while. And again, thank you for coming on. But Jordan, he brought this up, the turkey DNA. I was like, I ain't seen anything about that.
Yeah. So
I got on there and it was the Meat Eater podcast with Lake Pickle, and he was talking to, I think it was Dr. Chamberlain who he was speaking with. And the one thing that stuck out to me is the interbreeding. I was like, man, I didn't even think about that, because who outside of you, me, everybody else listening, who really gives a crap about turkey DNA? I don't. And I didn't listen to that until I didn't know of any reason to. And then he started talking about that there's certain parts of the country you go to that all the turkeys in this area, it may be a big population, but it's just about reached its max, and it could potentially start declining because these birds, they're all at least cousins now. And as they keep breeding, it's just going to get tighter and tighter and tighter until they breed themselves out. And I from me listening to that, that's what I understood as a concern to this.
When we looked at those samples initially for our state in Western Louisiana, and then again in Southeastern Louisiana, where we had sample. So to be clear, we sampled birds in Western Louisiana from 2014 to now. And in Southeastern Louisiana, we only did it for a 3-year period, 2020 to 2022. So we sent those off, and there was a lot of difference in the relatedness of those two populations, as you would expect, or I would have expected, because of the habitat. Remember earlier I was describing the habitat in Western Louisiana kind of being as our optimal habitat, large forested landscapes, birds can move, there's barriers out there that limit their movements, but they're far fewer than they are in Southeastern Louisiana, where you have major urban areas, development, interstates, road systems, pastures that are useless to them, and scattered hardwood drains with pockets of pine uplands that they left to use in. So what we saw and what popped out for me, I don't want to quote the study exactly because I don't remember the sure enough specifics off the top of my head, but basically what we saw was those birds in Southeast Louisiana were far more related to each other than the birds in Western Louisiana. And we don't really know the ramifications of that fully, because the reproduction during that time frame, what we saw from our research birds, the birds that actually nested, were that our research birds in Southeast Louisiana were more successful than the ones in Western Louisiana. But again, environmental factors play a big role in that, and probably looking at considerably different factors if I had to guess across those study sites. But so just because I think the paper quoted them as being like third order relatives, which would be second, third cousins most times. So not, like brother, sister kind of thing, but
it's still illegal.
Definitely frowned upon, So, but yeah.
When you think about it, is that your biggest concern? is a decline in population due to inbreeding?
No, I don't. I'm not. I mean, I would love to have something that would point me in that direction because I think we could easily fix that by supplementing populations, with different bird. In other words, moving birds around within the state. My biggest concern for wild turkeys, much like for bobwhites, like we were talking about earlier, is maintaining and increasing the amount of quality habitat that we have across this state. That's bottom line. Turkeys are nothing more than a large quail. They're a quail on a different scale, if you want to rhyme about it. When you look at quail, I talked about the limiting factors being, the way the habitats are managed. Quail have a home range of, 80 or 100 acres in a good area, while turkeys have a home range of 1,500 acres, so they're on different scales and they're more generalists. They can use different habitats, but still have to have those habitats to be able to utilize. And far too many places have been, I don't know, you just look back over time at the decades and when we were talking about the heyday of wild turkeys in the 90s, the landscape looked a lot different than it does today, even in our best turkey habitat, So just let that sink in a minute. So we got to figure out how moving forward we can make sure we maintain places that are good quality habitat for turkeys. And the only way I know to do that, and we try to address it with every landowner we talk to, everybody that'll listen, turkey hunters included, because in my opinion, sometimes turkey hunters get a bit complacent and they want to, they're coming off a long deer season and they might have gone some white perch fishing somewhere and, all of a sudden it's 1st of April, we need to go turkey hunting. Where are the turkeys at for me to go shoot? We can't always be like that. We need to be thinking about these critters throughout the year and putting some habitat on the ground, even if it's just your 40 that your Nana owns. If there's something good that can be done on that property, we need to try to be doing it. And we've got some staff and I can come and help if people need it, give advice on management activities. We can try to find cost share for different activities and things like that. But, the goal is just to make every acre we can usable space for turkeys. You want to limit the number of barriers that are out there on the landscape because, you hadn't led me down the road yet to talk about it, but I figure it would be coming. A lot of people want to talk. You asked me about the complaints. I don't want, like I said, don't call them complaints, but the concerns and the things you hear from folks is, well, what about the predators? What about the predators on the landscape? What can we do? What do we need to do about them? Well, if we do a good job managing habitat, the predators don't have nearly the impact they do in poor quality habitat. So I heard a great analogy the other day on a podcast, and I'll quote it, the Wild Turkey Science podcast. Dr. Goolsby got on there and talked about, a bucket of water that's full of water. That represents your turkey populations. And down at the bottom of that bucket, you got 2 holes in it. And one of them is the size of a quarter, and one of them is the size of a pin prick. But a pin prick represents predators, and the quarter-size hole represents habitat. If you want to have the most turkeys on your property for the longest period of time, in other words, keep the water in the bucket the longest, which hole are you going to plug first?
That quarter size.
Yeah, that's right. You're not going to go. Now, the problem is a lot of our hunters out there are on leased properties. They got a club. There's 40 other members. They don't own the land. So there's not a lot they can do in the habitat holes, to keep the water from flowing out of that bucket. But there are a few things that if you get with local biologists and look at that landscape and don't look at it just around your stand, your deer stand, or look at it as a whole, as, hey, we've got a decent forest stand over here that turkeys might use, and we've got a decent one over there, but they can't get from one to the other. We need to figure out a way to get them from one to the other and get them to move across the landscape. A lot of that connectivity can be addressed even on lease property, and you want to address it in a way you're not setting them up for failure, putting them in front of a coyote or a bobcat that may be hunting on that road, So things to think about, in terms of how to go about it. No doubt predators eat a lot of turkeys. There ain't no doubt about it,
What's the biggest predator a turkey has?
So a lot of debate over this, and I have my opinion, and my opinion has been swayed a little bit in recent times. I feel like for male turkeys, it's us, without a doubt. Not much else kills male wild turkeys. Great horned owls may take one on the roost on occasion. Occasionally a coyote might luck up and catch one. Female turkeys on the nest, typically that's when they're most susceptible. They got to spend 2 months of their life on the ground, at night. What's hunting at night on the ground? Bobcats and coyotes. People want to say raccoons and possums are a big contributor, but some of the latest research we got and things that have been highlighted speaks more to the fact that they're coming in as more of a nest scavenger because that nest has been abandoned because something has either moved the hen off the nest or killed the hen completely and taken her out of the equation. And we know this because a lot of the latest research, because of the genetics work we were wanting to do, we've got the ability to track turkey nests at 15-minute intervals now, right? So we know the minute that hen's supposed to leave the nest, and if she does early and don't come back, we can get to that nest very quickly.
How do y'all know that?
Well, we've got a GPS tag on their back that's we can track it with a VHF signal, get close enough to that signal to download the GPS data off of that unit that tells us where she's been on that landscape. That's how we know the nesting dates that I mentioned earlier. Because we know that because she starts becoming stationary in one location. We see a bunch of dots focused in that one location. Well, she's on a nest. Well, we can go back and see the first day she went to that location, right? We can backtrack it through time, and that's the first day she laid an egg. That's how you get a nest initiation date. So then you can track that nest. That nest is supposed to incubate, 28 days, whatever it may be, and she's supposed to hatch out, once she starts incubating, which is spending that time on the nest. When she's laying, she's coming and putting an egg down and going back about her daily routine, covering it up or hiding it or something, coming back doing the same thing the next day. Usually they lay 8 to 12 eggs. They're going to lay an egg a day typically, and then they'll start incubating, which is staying on that nest to get those temperatures up, trigger those eggs to start developing.
Real quick, I want you to keep going what you're going to. When do they typically lay their first egg? From time they're bred of April 9th-ish?
Oh, it's going to be usually within 24 or 48 hours of that.
Really?
Bred, yeah.
Wow, that's quick.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was that quick.
Where they're looking, they have the ability to store semen, and fertilize eggs off of that stored semen. But what Dr. Chamberlain and them have shown and other works have shown is they often just keep getting subsequent breeding attempts, sometimes from multiple different gobblers. So you may have a clutch that only has one gobbler represented in it as being, fertilized eggs, or you may have a clutch that has 2 or 3, gobblers represented in it. So that's what I was getting back to when we see that a nest has either failed or hatched successfully, our research assistants are able to get to that nest fairly quickly and recover either whole eggs or egg shells if it hatched. Rarely do we find, if we get there within a 24 or 36-hour window, rarely do we find a nest that's just torn apart and nothing's found it yet, right? So something happened to the hen. We're the first one at the nest. The raccoon didn't come eat the eggs and then the hen left, or there'd be eggshells there, So we pick up whole eggs, figure out, we get the embryos and the membranes, and they do the genetics work on that, figure out who the dad is. Is the dad related to somebody we caught already? Because we got blood samples from a lot of males it's a whole complex thing that I don't even understand, to be honest with you. Never will understand. All of that work will be coming down the pipe far after I'm gone, probably, in terms of working in my career. But anyway, my point being is, you asked what's the most important predator, and I think it differs from male to female in time of the year. But for females, I think bobcats and coyotes, coyotes are far more prevalent on this landscape than they ever have been. And I think they're primary predators on wild turkey hens. And I think, fortunately, I don't want to say that raccoons and skunks and possums are free, or hogs are free of any blame. They're definitely going to predate a turkey nest when they find it, but they don't find nearly as many of them as we thought. The problem with that, and the way I wanted to frame that, was old research, where we relied on a VHF signal only, where that student had to actually go out each day and locate that hen to get 1 or 2 points on that hen. Well, if you had a hen that started nesting, right, and she's nesting, and every day she's at the same spot, right, well, all of a sudden you go out there and it may have been 2 or 3 days and she's not at that spot. Well, you can't just immediately run into that nest. She may be recessing. She may be off, and then she's at that spot again, off. She's moving around. She's not on her nest. Well, it's been 3 or 4 days now, and that nest has been abandoned. By then, those eggs are starting to decompose. Things are smelling them. Scavengers are coming in. So that's kind of the theory that's working now. I mean, we've got some accelerometer data on our turkey tags now that show turkey movements and how they vary. So you can determine like flushes, like from a nest and things like that, because you see a sudden change in movement pattern. You see an increase in velocity. That's how the technology is evolving. So you would assume that something has flushed the hen off the nest, and or worst case scenario, you find the hen dead. She's been killed already, and so.
Do y'all take the eggs and incubate them?
No, we don't do any incubating. We do take the eggs, but for genetics work.
No hatching.
No, you can. I mean, once that happens and then incubation is disrupted, it's probably not going to.
Even within the 12 hours, 24 hours?
They've done a little bit of work in Florida where they've taken the eggs and hatched them out. Now, Dr. Latchley over there is kind of recreating some of Lovett Williams' work where talking about, not Lovett Williams, Hutto's work where he's following birds around and things like that and imprinting and seeing what they're doing. He's taking it to another level, looking at habitat differences and variation between a combination of Williams and Hutto's work, but he's looking at habitat variations in brood habitat of imprinted turkey poults, so it's pretty interesting stuff, a neat little twist on what they're doing. He's big into that. So he's taken wild turkey eggs and hatched them off of abandoned nests and things like that. But we don't.
Yeah.
So
we
let nature take its course at that point. So
yeah. On the different subspecies of turkeys we have, are Rios, are they more robust than an Eastern when it comes to habitat and maybe temperature and different things like that?
I would say yes and no, depending on the conditions. That's what makes them a subspecies. They're better adapted to the environment that they're in, right? So yes, hot, dry conditions, Rios are more robust. But you bring a Rio over here in a wet, nasty Louisiana swamp, I'm not too sure he's going to fare very well. May not make it. So you bring an Eastern over to the West Texas, I doubt they'll do very well either. So that's what, by definition, makes them that subspecies. They become adapted to that environment or that area that they're in, and
it's almost like
I've been to South Florida, man. I like South Florida a lot, and it still amazes me that a turkey can live down there. Like it goes against everything I know to be true. Well, some years it's dry as a bone. I mean, it's dust everywhere, but some years it's like water everywhere.
They look like a gadwall.
So
swimming out there on the water.
I've been lucky enough to go down there twice with a friend of mine hunting, and we hunted public land both times, and I harvested birds both times I went. And the second bird I killed, just to give you a perspective on it, I was in a catcher squat because I was standing in water, and I heard the turkey in the water before I saw it. Like you would hear a turkey in the leaves. We heard him walking bloop, bloop, bloop in the water. And he walked up there gobbling and strutting just like any turkey would do.
No way.
Yes. He was in, for him, it was, 4 or 5 inch deep water. And I was sitting there in 6 or 8 inch deep water, leaned up against a rotten stump in a catcher squat. I've never been in such an awkward position.
And that's, if you're not used to it, which when I was younger and played ball, I did not want to play catcher because I hated sitting down there like that. They had little pads that went, put on the back of your calves. Yeah. I hated that. It was so uncomfortable.
I was this close to just sucking it up and just getting on my knees in the water. But thankfully he was coming. So
well, that's one thing that you don't have to deal with is down there, like with the Osceolas, they have the water and all that, but they're the pythons, man. Them things.
I've yet to see one. People keep telling me about them, but I don't know if I'm not looking in the right spots or
I hope you keep going and you don't see them because they say, I don't think they're going to go and attack you unless you mess with them. But I forgot the number, but maybe it's a Joe Rogan podcast. He had somebody on. He said like upwards of 90 something, maybe even 99. I don't remember, but it was upwards of 90 something % of the game, like the wildlife in the Everglades, completely eradicated because of the pythons.
Yeah. Okay.
And which again, I'm sure you weren't down there hunting in the Everglades, but
we were just north of the Everglades.
And so, but I'm like, that they've expanded.
Big Cypress, I'll name it. It's 1 million acre square. So it's huge,
big area. That'd be awesome though if you could go and you could get a Rio and take the best parts of a Rio and put that with the best parts of an Eastern, and get them where they're here, where they could adapt. I tell you, the best thing to do is teach them someone's how to nest up in a tree.
An example that we're struggling with right now, and we're not in this state so much as Texas is, but they've tried to do some super stocking here recently in East Texas, trying to bring those populations back with Easterns, and have had mixed results. And for years, this will be about the third time they've tried to restock these areas. And granted, the habitat quality is pretty poor, especially on the private lands. They've got a few public land hubs that are pretty decent, but there's something happening with those environmental conditions along that transition between Eastern to Rio country that's not good for Easterns and not good for Rios. So
Well, somebody listening right now, if they got some property, whether it's leased ground or they own it or their friend owns it or whatever, they're just like, hey, we want to make this place a little bit better for some turkey habitat, just habitat overall, specifically turkeys. What's their first step in reaching out to y'all?
The first step would be to contact one of our regional offices. We've got some private land biologists that can go out, or they can call me directly if they want to, if they so desire. And I could either help facilitate the contact or actually, go out myself. I don't have a ton of time to get to everybody in the state always, depending on what time of year it is. But I try to go on as many site visits as I can, because one of the parts that I truly enjoy about my job and have for a long time. I've done private lands work throughout my career before I was in the turkey program role here. So I enjoy working with landowners and trying to help them along in terms of their management. They don't always like what I have to say, but I think, when you build a good relationship with somebody, at least they respect you, get to a point where they can respect what you're telling them, and hopefully, they implement some of the things you recommend and see some positive results. So that would be the first step, to either contact myself or one of our region offices. And cause it's hard for me to sit here on the program today and tell people exactly what they need to do without knowing what the property looks like to start with and what's around it. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of cases, it's not the actual landowner that I'm looking at. That's the problem. It's something around it, just to give you, for instance, we've had that struggle with some of our wildlife management areas. One of the most popular management areas for years for hunting wild turkeys in the state was Tunica Hills Wildlife Management Area in West Feliciana Parish, and had a pretty strong turkey population, pretty decent harvest for a small property. Just to give you perspective, it was about 3,000 acres at the time. They were harvesting anywhere from 10 to 15 birds a year, with lottery type hunts and some open dates in there. So everything was clicking along just fine until here recently they started having, after COVID kicked in, they got a big influx of different types of users on the property, a lot more recreational use that kind of conflicted with what was happening with regard to our turkey hunters and the limited seasons that they had. So there were some conflict problems there. We tried to address those, and harvest still didn't respond. Numbers were down. So when you start stepping back and looking at that property at 3,000 acres, but you look at the surrounding landscape that it was in, and it had changed a heck of a lot in the last 20 years. It went from having a lot of other properties that was good quality turkey habitat surrounding it to having very few properties that are good quality turkey habitat. People, just the way the cycle went of management around there, people became a little more interested in managing aggressively for deer habitat. And when you do that, you make your entire property thick, it can create some exceptional deer habitat at different intervals, in stages of development. But if I can't walk through it and you can't walk through it, a turkey certainly can't walk through it. So they either have to go around it or fly over it. And so that's kind of a simple way to put in perspective what turkey habitat is. I try to explain it to folks, no matter where you are, depending on bottom hardwood systems or upland pine systems with that hardwood SMZ zone, what you're looking for. is you want to have woods that are open and thick at the same time. So in other words, they have scattered thick pockets that you can't really see. You don't want to be in those wide open woods that you can see 300 yards. You'd rather only be able to see 75 or 100 yards in this direction and can't see very far at all in this direction. It means there's some thick nesting cover. You also don't want it to be so thick you can't see 10 yards in front of you. You can't walk through it, like I just said. That's definitely a limiting factor there. So envision, I'm a big small game hunter myself too. Envision being able to squirrel hunt in the turkey woods. That's what you want it to look like. You want to be able to sneak around little thickets here and there into the big pretty patches of open woods, a little flat right over here. There's a little connection area over here you go through and you hit another little flat and then you transition up to that pine ridge and it's open, but there's a thicket along the bottom, a couple tree fall gaps, where a storm knocks some trees down. Or a good select harvest, a variable retention select harvest, and a lot of foresters implement, can provide those conditions. But that's kind of, if you had to describe it without knowing what the property looked like, without knowing each individual case, I hope that's, terms in which people can kind of understand, to get that vision to it, because it's hard, But so, yeah, that's an instance on one of our own properties where we've seen some pretty significant declines and are struggling to explain exactly why, So, yeah, we don't always have the answers. So that's for sure.
A lot of people may expect it, but I mean, you can't. Even with the technology you have and everything that y'all are learning, you're not gonna always have the answers.
Yeah.
Well, you're out there in Turkey Woods a lot. Can you do a good hoot owl call?
I don't know about a good one. Come on now, you gonna put me on the spot?
I've never heard a Cajun hit a hoot owl.
No Cajun.
No Cajun.
I'm from Livingston Parish. Come on now. So come on, Nolan.
But look, bro. So you have South Louisiana, and then you got like essentially South Arkansas, which is North Louisiana, or maybe East Texas or West Mississippi.
I'm in a zone between that.
Are
somewhere.
You?
Yeah, I'm not. No Cajun here.
So you ain't got a Cajun squeal behind that hoot owl?
No. I don't. No, you can't put me on the spot like that, man.
I'm assuming that
you didn't tell me anything about that.
Yeah, no, I'm messing with you. But unless you got you a good one, and then I'll put you on the spot quick. But I'm assuming you in your position, this has got to be the most exciting time of the year. I know you're getting to hunt, but also it's like you're looking through the summer, the fall, the winter, where you're just observing. And like we said at the beginning of this thing, a lot of people, a successful hunt, most of the hunts that I've been on, we haven't killed. Just like most people, most of the hunts they've been on, they haven't killed a tom.
Yeah.
But hearing that gobble, when you hear that son of a gun and you hear him more than just one time, it's like, oh man, you think you have a chance, or you can just hear the woods just vibrate as you're sitting there listening to him.
Yeah.
Man, it just makes you smile.
And just the woods waking up in the spring is different, man. The birds singing, and you just hear the different species out there. And you're going to hear stuff in the spring you don't hear any other time of the year. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's my favorite for sure. And I'm coming off of a busy time typically, when we've got a quota of birds to catch. Those transmitters I mentioned earlier, they don't come cheap. I'm working with research partners like the Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service, and LSU there with Dr. Collier and his group of students that are working on a project. A lot of people are working together to get those things out so that we can get the necessary information. So January through early March is pretty wide open for me. Probably one of my busiest times of the year. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a little bit of break, but I'd be lying if I told you that it's almost like it's not work sometimes. Cause my job during that time period, a lot of the times when I'm not at the office handling the day-to-day activities of a program, my job is to find turkeys and catch turkeys. So, in a sense, that's like hunting season is longer, you know, and I get to use bait, but that'll open your eyes.
I'm going to start turkey hunting with you.
That'll open your eyes as to why bait is not allowed. But I will tell you this, bait, it wouldn't be the answer, because it don't take them but one time to shoot a rocket net or a disturbance over them, and they're not coming back to that spot. So
you just relocate and just go somewhere completely different? Or?
Generally, yeah. Or if it's two different groups of turkeys coming, you don't want to ever try to let the other group see what happened to the first one, but yeah, they don't like the disturbance a lot. But so anyway, no, it's fun time, and I get to learn a lot about the state, in the process, and see a lot of pretty areas. And
how many turkeys y'all catch and tag?
So
because that number's gonna be different. Catching and tagging is gonna be different, but
No, I mean, no, we tag everything we catch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, males, females, everything we catch gets a leg band and a VHF GPS tag. So this year we caught 40, and that was a low year. It was the last year of the project. With the changes in the cost of all the gear and everything, we limited the number of transmitters a little bit. And our PhD student, Patrick Ryan, is going to be finishing up his field work this summer, spring and summer. So he'll be starting to work on his dissertation after that, and won't be in the woods tracking a lot of birds. But not a lot of huge activity going on in the fall. But we have caught as many as 140 in a year in an area.
You put bands on all them?
Yep. So it just varies. I think I need to pull together the final number for the entirety of the project, but I want to say it's in the neighborhood of 800 turkeys in Kisatchie National Forest over the 11 years that we've done it now. So
yeah, you hear people killing a turkey that's got a band on.
Oh yeah, they get excited about it. Well, as they should,
Yeah.
It's neat. Yeah, and they like the transmitters too. Looking at them because they want to know where he's been, where he came from, and stuff like that. And in some cases we can share that. Some cases we don't. But.
Well, I wish you was in your work truck. I'd tell you to hang out here, and I'd go break in real quick and go find a transmitter and a couple bands. I'd go grab them.
Yeah. Well,
but I do. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Oh, ain't no problem, man. I enjoyed it.
This has been awesome.
Hopefully, I've covered everything you was interested in. If you got something else, I got extra time, so I'm here. But
I mean, it's nothing. You've hit everything. I know there's people right now that they're probably thinking the obvious, like, well, ask this or ask this. I can't think of what it is.
You hadn't asked me what it looks like for this year yet. That's an important one that's on everybody's mind.
Yep, in what way?
It's forecast in terms of what do you think is going to happen in 2026?
Yeah, that's great. So what do you think is going to happen in 2026? And because I know that there's a very, very, very rough estimated number. You can't put out the hair snares like you can for bear. You can't do the browsing data like you can for deer. There's certain things you can't do, like the observing like you can for ducks. There's things that you can do for those species that you cannot do for turkeys. And I know that rough number that y'all have, it's really just what it is a rough estimate, a rough number.
Yeah.
So how do you get predictions or guesses for what this year's going to look like?
So what I use primarily is two things, and three things, to be honest. I look at our harvest trend that we talked about. The reported harvest has been elevated the last couple of years. Hunters had stayed about the same. So we're thinking we have more turkeys on the landscape, thinking things are good. And I want to look at environmental conditions over the most recent breeding period, which was last summer. Pretty good environmental conditions translated to probably going to be another above average hatch. We hadn't quite finished the analysis on that yet. We're running a little bit behind on that, and in the previous 2 years, 24 and 23 were fairly good hatches as well. So going off of all of that information tells me that if we get pretty good weather conditions that line up for the start of our season, the first 2 weeks of our season, that's when the majority of our turkeys are harvested. We get decent weather conditions, our hunters are to do well, and I'm hoping they do, because it behooves me to see good positive trends, or at least maintain the level at which we've gotten to, So I'm hopeful for another good season and summarize that up. So
how is that line tiptoed that we want to have as many turkeys as we can,
right?
But we also, you want the hunters to keep. You want to have a good, successful year for the hunters,
right?
So how do you look at that line of, well, I want the hunters to do really good, but do you think not so good that it have a decline on turkeys?
A decline on turkeys.
So what do you think about? How does that look?
I think as long as and that's again, that was another reason for the season delay. It was a step we could take that would buy us some time, even on years where we had poor reproduction. If we can just make things a little bit better, we're in a better position moving forward, and exponentially, that adds up and makes a difference. So if we do get in a scenario where we've got some wet years stacked on top of one another, and we see our harvest drop off, which means we got less turkeys on the landscape, we can rest assured that little step is making things a little bit better and hopefully setting us up in a little bit better position than we would be for when we do get good conditions for nesting and brood rearing again. And I think that's what we saw when we track our data. That's why it took a little while to really see an increase. And like, again, I'm not saying the increase is solely because of the change we made. I'm just saying we wouldn't see the higher numbers we're seeing now had we not implemented that change. I think we'd still seen an increase. Don't get me wrong, just because environmental conditions change. I just don't think it would be as magnified as it is today.
Over the different years.
Yes, over the different years. Yeah. So that's where it helps us, if we can. I'm not out there trying to make, with a regulation change, I'm not trying to make a great hatch year even greater. I'm trying to make a moderate hatch year a little bit better. You follow what I'm saying? And so I think when you do that, you set yourself up and put yourself in a better position to where when you do get those great years, you can really capitalize on them in areas. If you're starting from a level where you're a little bit higher than you would have been, you're already in better shape. Does that make sense? I'm probably not doing the best job laying that out there, but that was the goal of the thing. We know we're not gonna. We're gonna have these historic years of being good hatch years. Every Mississippi has one. We have one. Arkansas. Every state around us has a great hatch. A big boom. We're gonna have that. I'm not trying to make that super duper better. I'm just trying to make the average year a little bit better, so we have more turkeys going into that. So that's kind of the way I looked at it and approached it with regard to the regulation change. And I kind of forgot train of thought we were going. What we're talking about? The forecasting.
Right, the forecasting. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm hopeful for another good year based on the reproduction we've had in the last 3. Our harvest numbers have been up, and just need some good weather to line up during turkey season.
What's the male to female ratio?
Based on our brood survey, we see about 3 to 4 females per male in that survey.
Okay.
So, and a lot of states are right in there, right that line there. Some of them are a little bit lower than that. They may see 2 females per male, but that's another indication. So just to get it some rough population estimates, that's one way to look at it. You got harvest, we know the harvest rate because we banded a lot of turkeys over the years, so we can extrapolate the number of males we might have in the state, and then we use that ratio to extrapolate the number of females. But that's an extremely rough, but slightly better than a guess.
Yeah, but so, probably not by a whole lot.
And not by a whole lot. So any model's only as good as the information you put in it. So yeah. Again, it goes back to we just don't have a reliable means of. Not saying that you have to have it all the time, but it would make me feel a little better.
It'd be nice to know really how many we have.
Yeah. And then that you could look at things with regard to habitat shifts and stuff long term if you knew population estimates at different intervals, and you could say because I would have loved to know what our population estimate was back in 1998, or 1997 compared to now. And
you feel like it's less?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We have less turkeys for sure. So,
think just habitat is big.
Yeah, that's the biggest driver is loss of quality habitat. Now we've got a lot of areas that are phasing into some decent habitat. You got a lot of properties, especially up in this region. It was WRP, Wetland Reserve Program at the time. It's now called Wetland Reserve Easements, WRE. But a lot of those properties were ag land at that time, and then has been planted to bottomland hardwood forest, and are phasing into somewhat turkey habitat, and at different stages of development. Now, granted, just by name alone, wetland reserve easement, those properties are not the highest, driest, best turkey ground that's there, but they could be usable space for wild turkeys on the drier years,
Yeah.
So we're interested to see how that shapes out. And, I get some calls from landowners that have that and want to know how best to manage it on their property. And a lot of them want to know, hey, when can I get some turkeys brought here? And there's some hurdles. For the most part, we consider our restocking effort in Louisiana to be complete. We consider that most of the habitats that are suitable for wild turkeys, turkeys exist in. However, we haven't closed our program. The applications and all are still online, but there are some pretty strict criteria that properties have to meet to be eligible. I get a lot of applications. I say a lot, several applications a year, and most of them don't meet the criteria. I don't know if folks just miss it or don't review it closely enough, but we're basically looking for tracts that are 4,000 acres in size at a minimum of quality turkey habitat before we'd even consider it, because the last thing we want to do is be taking birds from an area and moving them to an area where they don't have the best chance of succeeding.
Yeah. So is that what y'all would do? Is you'd catch birds in Kisatchie and then move them or wherever?
Well, in the old days, we might have done something like that, but in this day and time, we wouldn't dare take them from public land and move them from private because of the concerns that we've had over the last decade with populations dipping down. That's another hurdle for restocking areas this day and time. And just to give you an example, we had a landowner in central Louisiana that contacted us. This was about 5 years ago. Had about 13,000 acres of property and 2 different tracts across a highway that was pretty good looking turkey habitat. I went and looked at it. They were doing some, it was industry land, don't get me wrong, but they were doing some great habitat management. They were doing a little bit of burning, some appropriate thinnings and stuff, and weren't super aggressive, cutting all the hardwoods or anything like that. So in a nutshell, the properties looked pretty good. They just didn't have any turkeys, and there weren't any turkeys nearby. The WMA that had them, we had since closed the season on, and it's totally different habitat. But so our first step for that process was that area was still under open turkey season, believe it or not. And so the first step was we had to close the turkey season. They met the criteria in terms of acreage and habitat, distance to a known population. They got to be so far away from a known population, because if you do have quality habitat that's close to a known population, the assumption is that the birds will find it, and it's usually the case. They'll usually travel around to find it. And that distance is 10 miles, if you were wondering. But so anyway, we looked at all those criteria, and then we got to that question. Well, where the heck are we going to get birds from? And, heck, one of the places that's responsible for a lot of restocking on this whole state back in the 80s was Lookout Point right here in East Carroll Parish. I keep pointing at this mic. But heck, that property's been struggling, and it was under a closed season not that long ago. Birds have pretty much disappeared from it, river staying up flooding. So you just don't have the source populations to draw from that we once had. And the last thing I want to do is have a negative impact on a population that's doing okay just so we can maybe reestablish them here. So where we landed with that project was, in order to get birds, that landowner also had different other holdings throughout the state, smaller tracts that had turkeys. So we utilized those at a very limited scale, where we took a few birds off of this tract, a few birds off of that tract, and we eventually restocked it over a 3-year period. And those birds seem to be doing well. Last report I got, which was a couple weeks ago, they're still seeing them and hearing them. I know no season. There won't be a season until at least another 4 years, because they're still under the season has to remain closed 5 years from the last bird being put there. So restocking an area is not out of the question these days and times, but it's a lot more hurdles to overcome. And we got to make sure we're doing our due diligence to the birds, at the end of the day. I get a lot of requests from the Chaffalaa Basin area, because it was once just flourishing with wild turkeys, as you probably heard from back in the day. And then after the Morganza Spillway was opened in 2011 and stayed open and flooded area for 45 days plus, lost a significant amount of birds. And the place never really recovered, because it was stuck in that same decade of wet springs that I told you about Richard K. Yancey was stuck in. So the few birds they had couldn't reproduce. And when you look at survival rate on a wild turkey hen at 60-something%, well, if she goes 4 years and don't reproduce, she's dead. She's not going to reproduce. So if she gets that long, so you got to have some reproduction in that quick window, or they blink out on you. And that's exactly what's happening now. We closed the season. We pulled the season way back on Sherburne WMA and eventually closed it. Now we've seen some really good strides and positive things on Sherburne since then. These last 3 dry summers we've had, 2 dry summers. So we're excited about that. I mean, we're not by no means ready to open things up just yet, but some of the private lands, out and about from there are still struggling and don't have any birds. And you need those landscapes to be able to function, the genetic flow like you were talking about earlier. And you don't want to ever put them on an island if you can help it. So a lot of complex things things goes on, it's not just as easy as bring me some turkeys and,
Yeah.
You're
not going and buying them from Tractor Supply.
No, and now there's
out.
different avenues where we can bring turkeys in from other states, but it's been proven by several projects that the closer they come from from the closer the area is, the source population is to the area you're stocking, the better your chances are of those birds.
But for them to not make it in an environment like that, that's what they're going to breed. As long as they're healthy enough to do it.
Right. But they may not breed that first year, but if they live to make it the second year and more birds are put, that was the other thing that was shown in a little bit of recent research that we heard a dissertation on, is those initial birds may not have bred, but they served a purpose, because when you brought additional birds that next year, there were already birds on that landscape that they could link up with, and breeding was facilitated, and more, I guess you would say, more efficient use of the area.
They had somebody show them the ropes.
Right. Yeah. They weren't in total search mode like the initial birds that were put out there.
Yeah.
So, and we saw a little bit of that with some work we did in Caddo Parish when I first started in this position. But they really roamed a lot. And then the second round of birds we put out there stayed a lot tighter. And we've since opened the season up there. So, but it was a small little area effort. But yeah, I mean, we still consider it. So I just want people to know that, but just know going in that there are certain criteria that you've got to meet, and we got to stay strict to that, or else we're not doing the birds justice. And you asked earlier about my job and how it gets confusing and things like that. I guess that were what you were trying to get at. And that's where I struggle the most is, yes, I'm a turkey hunter, no doubt. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I talk to a lot of turkey hunters, and I serve a lot of turkey hunters as a public servant. But I'm also have a obligation to the resource too, and I take that very seriously, and I put that before everything. So, and I try to, and I've always tried to do that, because without the resource, there would be none of us.
Right.
So.
Well, this time of the year, how often are you out there following turkeys? Not hunting too, but you're out there working, doing your job. You're out there listening, watching, chasing down turkeys. So
I don't do a lot of the on the ground tracking and downloading and getting information. There's usually a team of LSU assistants that do that, technicians and students that are doing it day to day. They're living out there with them, all from starting now to the really July, end of July, really. I'll go from time to time with them and accompany them just to kind of see that things are going. If they have a problem, I can help them solve it, or just to make sure things are going smoothly and they're not having any problems. So, but they're out there tracking our hens, our gobblers, keeping tabs on. We get a band report from a hunter who harvested one. They'll go get the transmitter from that hunter and get the data off of it, things like that. But they're tracking our females, keeping tabs on when they should be going, when they start nesting and they're incubating. And if they have a brood, they follow that brood for a period of time too, as long as they're out there on the landscape. So they got a real busy job, even with just 40 turkeys online. But I think all total, Patrick told me the other day that with the birds we still had online from last year, see, some tags we can change the program and get a couple extra year worth of data, but we get less frequent data by doing that, because it saves some of the battery life on these units. So we don't always count on that, but we are still tracking a few birds from last year. So I want to say we're going to have slightly more than 40 online for this spring. So,
well, I know you spend a lot of time out in the field.
Yeah.
This time of the year. What's something people like? I mean, I'm gearing up. I'm ready to go kill some turkeys. We got Texas and Kansas, and of course here chasing the hard-headed, tight-lipped Eastern. But what you been around them as much as you have, what's something? Drop us a little nugget of helping us either find birds, locate birds, hunt birds.
A little nugget just from what I picked up from the job, or just turkey hunting myself, or combination of the two?
Combination between the two. Just all your experience.
Okay. I'm trying to think of which one I want to tell you.
Like you said, brother, you got nothing but time. We'll sit here and we'll take notes.
Yeah, you got me on the hot seat. Come
on, look, Uncle Bo, let him sign.
Remember, I told y'all earlier that a lot of the gobbling activity studies have shown a high rate of variability from day to day. Just keep that in mind when you're in the woods. Just because you hear him there one Sunday when you leave, don't mean he'll be gobbling the next Friday when you get back. He might still be there. There's a good chance he's still there. He just may not be gobbling. So, and I've seen that and learned it the hard way so many times. You could be fooling with birds consecutive days, and at different points of the season, he may gobble his head off every morning for 3 mornings in a row. Then he may not gobble at all for 3 mornings in a row, or he may gobble one day and not the next, and one day and not the next. So each bird is an individual, and we know that because we want to hear that gobbler that gets us excited, the one that we think is the most acceptable. I mentioned it earlier, the one that's going to gobble 100 times, that's the one that gets me fired up. The one that I can stay engaged with all morning if I need to, that don't necessarily have to kill him. I just need to know I'm in the game, and takes him gobbling for me to do that typically, so that would be one nugget is just remember, don't expect them to gobble the same every time you go out there, because it's highly variable. We've learned that over time. And I think most good turkey hunters will tell you that too, that's why they go every day. It ain't to hear one. It's the chance to hear one, so, so having said that, that would be what I'd leave them with. I know that's probably not.
No, man, that's good.
Not high level stuff there, but
no, I mean that's the thing though, especially hunting public ground. You go and which I do not turkey hunt public ground anymore, but you go and there's a lot of people that do like at Kisatchie. Those 2 guys that was on the last episode here at Tone 29. Man, I wish I had some of their calls with me. They're at the house. I'd send you home with some. I should have thought about that. I'll get some and I'll send them to you. They're legit. But real quick, are you going back to the store? Or going back home tomorrow?
Yeah.
Depending on what time y'all leave, you go by Spotted Dog. Okay. We got some there.
All right.
So I'll tell them if you go there between business hours, if y'all are leaving after or be going through after 8 when they open, I'll get them to pull some. Okay. And you can stop it there and grab some more. Yeah. Check them out. Let me know what you think.
Great.
Yeah, like that. But just what's one thing they were talking about? I'm about to get on a different topic or a different thing. Like them hunting Kisatchie, going out there and listening for birds. And you go out there and you drive this public, piece, and you sit there at this track and you're listening and you don't hear anything. A lot of times, I've been in that boat too. A lot of times you're like, well, it's just not any turkeys here. Whereas like you're saying, we know now you can go back out a day, 2 days, 3 days later, and them some guns just 4 or 5 times and they're all striking off.
Mm-hmm. I just thinking back over the last probably 15 years I've hunted, and I didn't know this at the time that it was happening, but I recognize it now looking back. And I can remember those mornings. And I can remember the last one that happened was in 2021. I was hunting right close to my house, and I went on my lease up there and was on the north end of it. And it's a hunt I made just no telling how many times. I just walk in there and I just listen from one spot. And I tell you, it'd been one of those weird years where I hadn't heard much. It's like, man, how many turkeys we got? Our little lease has struggled since Hurricane Gustav wiped out our habitat in 08. We had a great year in 09, high water, that breeding season, and thick habitat for the next 10 years. So that equation essentially took us out of the turkey business until 2017 when we killed a turkey again. So that'll tell you, the habitat makes a difference. So they've slowly been hanging on and coming back, and since then, some years we'll kill 3 or 4, some years we won't kill but 1. So but anyway, long story short, 2021, and I'm up there listening, and like I said, if I had to guess at the time, I'd have said, man, there's 1 turkey up here I'm listening for. But that particular morning, I don't know what it is. By the time it was said and done, I'd heard like 6 or 7 gobble, and I hadn't heard that in years on that place. And I was thinking back. When I was walking out, didn't kill the turkey, didn't even sit down on one that morning. They weren't even close. Never was in the game. A couple of them was off the place, others shut up when they hit the ground, but I was just excited to hear that many. And I got to thinking about it on the way back, and I was thinking about the last time that had happened, which was probably pre-hurricane on that property, on that same area, where similar situation. I knew of maybe 2 or 3 turkeys up there at the time. but like by the end of the morning, I heard 9 gobble. It was one of them mornings where every turkey in the woods gobbled. But I don't think that happens very often, like we want it to.
Right.
Or we assume it does. Just because we hear 1 or 2, we think, that's all that's here. Sometimes that's true. There ain't no ifs, ands, or buts about it, And but sometimes it's not, And just because you hear 0 don't mean you're not in a good spot. So I've always approached public land where, I spend the first little bit of time I'm there, whether it's preseason, not so much anymore, but the first few days of the season or first few days of a trip, just trying to find birds, locate birds, not necessarily super engaged in everything I find, but then coming back to those spots, later on, and you be successful like that, just don't assume somebody's just because there's a truck there, somebody killed that turkey.
Yeah.
It probably ain't happened. So, but at any rate, so yeah, gobbling activity is super, super variable. I mean, that's what we all hinge the quality of our hunt on. I get it, Just know that it's super, super highly variable. And remember what I told you about the landowners live like literally across the road from one another. That took me back. I was like, how can that be? But it's just the way it is. It's turkeys being turkeys. They don't have anything else to do but gobble and move around and be turkeys all day long. They don't have to go to work. They don't have to do any of that, so
survive and
they gotta
move.
miss the occasional, catch attempt from a coyote or a dive on a raptor or something like that, and then get back to doing what they gotta do all day. So.
That's another thing. Decoys.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh.
You pack them in?
Nope. I seldom carry one. If you see me carrying a decoy, I'm desperate. And I mean desperate. But I seldom carry them.
I feel like that's one of those things that's getting more popular with people.
That's the old school tactic, no decoys. Decoys,
really?
I feel like to me, decoys came around and really got hot and heavy in the early 2000s, probably. When a lot of the hunting shows were in high gear and making a lot of content and stuff like that. But a lot of the old timers, Uncle Bo never used decoy. And a lot of the old timers from around home that I can talk about and remember, and my friend's grandfather, he's hunted turkeys since the 30s, since we had no turkeys, he wouldn't dare carry one, The last thing you want to do is give them something to see.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing now, like some of the avian X, some of the different decoys they have now, they are so realistic.
And they are. They so realistic they can be dangerous, you know, considering a lot of turkey hunting tactics nowadays, so.
And that's the thing of using them at the right time. I don't know if it's a call to use one all the times.
To be clear, I'm not knocking anybody for their hunting tactics, That's up to them.
But they have their place.
Yeah.
It's something you just want, that's another tool you want to have.
I'm not so proud to say I hadn't crawled up on my share of turkeys too. I enjoy that. That's a whole different.
Am I like reaping them?
No, not reaping them. Just being stealthy and getting
just
in their bubble.
Up.
Crawling to them, bringing it to them. But I've never reaped one behind a fan or a gobbler. I can see though the appeal of that.
It'd be fun.
But I wouldn't ever want to put myself in that spot though. Especially around my house.
Oh yeah, you'd have to be on public ground.
I'm
sorry. You'd have to be on private ground. Like you don't want to be around other people.
No, not at all, and not anybody that might even remotely be, willing to go above and beyond, like you mentioned earlier, with a rifle or something like that.
That TSS would not taste good.
Yeah, exactly. But I can certainly see the appeal of it, and there's been a lot of talk about, hey, does that reaping them, is that an unfair tactic? Is it targeting the quote unquote dominant gobbler where we shouldn't be? Man, that's way down there, as far as high complexity stuff we're talking. I don't know how much effect that would actually have. I just know, bottom line, in my opinion, it's unsafe, and I already know I'm taking a risk when I leave the tree and start crawling on my hands and knees to a gobbling turkey. You're taking a risk doing that. Just recognize that fact, but it's a calculated risk. So I wouldn't want to add to the drama and put male turkey parts in front of me and do that same thing.
But man, I'm gonna tell you, I've never done it either, and I agree with you. But dude, I've seen the videos of people doing it, and I'm like, oh man, that looks so much fun. But that's the thing about.
I'm not convinced though that, and I may be wrong. I don't know. Like I said, I've never done it. I'm speaking at it from a position of I've never actually done it, but I wouldn't be convinced it would work on some of the places I turkey hunt because I don't think the turkeys are just that. Number one, I think you need to be in a kind of a high density population, for the biology of the bird says you do anyway, to make them jealous enough to come hunt you down, right? Because otherwise they just going to either look and go the other way or stay where they're at or like, I don't know, so I'm old school, I guess, in that regard. I don't think I'd ever.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But it's something about seeing them toms running in.
Yeah.
It looks like they got forgive me here, but I don't know any other way to say it. It looks like they got a boob job.
Yeah.
That they're running and
that chest is
and
shaking.
the chest. Yeah, it's just shaking back. Man, I'm telling you, that's where like reaping them. If they were coming into you and they get right there to you and they just blow up and
you hear that drum.
Look, hey, it's one thing. We're talking about the gobble.
The rattle.
Man,
I know what you're gonna say,
dude. When you're sitting there in the woods, I haven't been on the hunts you have. I haven't. But no, I'm talking about just like with the time. You've been turkey hunting a lot longer than I have, but it's happened a few times. Maybe not many, but a few times. You're sitting there in the woods. You know that there's a turkey close by. You heard him gobble and he's over here, and you're trying to get set up, or you're even. It's happened one time, maybe once or twice, up in Felsenthal, and you get pinned, and you hunker down and lay low because you're not in a position to move. And you're hearing something and you don't really know what it is. Next thing you know, it's just right behind you or somewhere that you can't see behind some trees or bushes that like that. And you think a gobble gets you fired? Oh, that'll put you over the edge.
Oh, yeah. So what's the closest you ever had one gobble in your presence? Just ballpark it.
I mean, I want to say like up in Kansas?
Anywhere.
10, 12 yards.
Yeah. So I was hunting by the house one day, and I got just like you was talking about. I was trying to make a move on a turkey and got confused on where I was and ended up in a briar thicket trying to get to the road that the turkey was already in. Long story short, every turkey hunter's probably been. This was pre-Onyx, So back when you had to be a woodsman, and fortunately, I'm trained in forestry, so I knew a lot about compass and pacing and getting around the woods, So I felt like I had an advantage back then. Nowadays, anybody with a cell phone can go where I go. So, but this was all pre-Onyx, so I was confused that didn't quite come out in the right spot that I wanted to. And I had to crawl through the nastiest briar patch. And as I'm getting there, I knew I had screwed up because I'm just about to get to the edge of the road where I can glance and see. And just like you're talking about, I hear just blow me up right there. And look, I'm talking about I was making noise and everything. I don't know. I'm sure he thought I was a turkey coming out of that briar patch. So I couldn't do nothing but just lay down. My head was literally, distance of this table from the road, and the turkey was coming up the road strut. And, I've heard them strut really close to me before, and that wasn't the closest. But when that joker stood at the corner of that table and gobbled, I don't know how I held it together because that's a whole different sound at 6 feet than it is at 10 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards.
And it's not like a tame turkey.
No. It's
got some depth to it.
Well, you hear that chest shake, just that whole shake. That's what makes that vibration, is what gives them that volume or bass, that you're looking for. You hear that shake to it, it just, that's what wakes me up. That's when they're getting in range, You start hearing that. Like, yeah, got him.
I haven't been out listening for turkeys yet this year.
What you waiting on, man?
I don't know. Busy. The reason that we had to do this podcast now and not a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. Yeah. It just busy. But man, I have a Texas trip. So we got in a lease this past year in Texas, me and two buddies, and it's loaded.
There you go.
Loaded. Matter of fact, the very first trip I went out there, I took a trailer with a blind on it to go put up. I don't remember when that was. Maybe I really don't remember. October, I don't know. Sometime in the fall. It could have been before deer season. I don't think it was. It was definitely deer season because it was after I got through hunting in Kansas. So anyhow, I think it was October, November. And the very first time I pulled up on the far west side of this property, it's a little creek that runs through there, and it's where we hold a lot of our turkeys. So it seems the property's brand new to us, but it's 1,200 and something acres. But when I pulled up on this left side, part of the turkeys were on our property, part of them were on the neighbor's property. When I tell you it was 70, 80, 90. I don't know.
Nice.
I mean, it's just like, you drive by a field, in the wintertime of a bunch of snow geese. You're like, dude, it was just thousands. You don't know how to calculate that. You're just, it's just a freaking ton of birds. That's how this was. It's 70, 80, 90, 100, 110. Yeah. I don't know. It could have been 110. It could have been 70. It could have been 60. It was a lot of them. Yeah. And I was like, and of course, it was all hens, everything I noticed. But that was the very first time I pulled up on it and saw it. I was like, I knew we knew there were turkeys on it, but we didn't know really how much. And then hunting it, and then even trail cameras this year, it's like, oh yeah, it's gonna get ugly. So we're going out there. I still don't know the exact date. Probably the week after next. Probably the week after Easter.
Yeah,
is we're gonna slip out there. And I'm telling you, if I can, I need to look at regulations to make sure I can fill all 4 tags in one day in Texas.
Yeah, I think so.
Let me tell you.
Now, I will tell you the license has gone up this year in Texas from what it was. So be prepared for that. It's not like game changing, but it is more than double. So.
Well, good thing about it now, since we got that lease, I have it on auto renew, and this is like gas. I do care that gas is $3.58 a gallon or whatever it was. 96.
You're still going,
Yeah, I'm still going. It's just going to hit, and I'm not even going to see it. I'm like, I don't want to think about it. I don't even want to think about it.
You gotta go.
Yeah, but we're going to go do that, and like I said, we got the property that we own in Kansas, and you got to get drawn for that.
Yeah,
man, I wish.
I'm surprised to hear that. I would think they would have a better system for landowners in the state.
Non-resident landowners in the state of Kansas, you still have to get. You still got to get through the draw.
That's crazy. That's wild to me.
This is year, I think, number 3. It's been like that.
That's wild to me.
And like I told you before we started, dude, there's as many birds, if not more. So my buddy Nate Bartley, who's up there, he actually does a lot with the youth, and he's part of the sheriff's office up there, but he works with Game and Fish and works with these other nonprofits, taking people pheasant hunting and deer hunting. But turkey hunting, that's something he's helped out and done. He's put a big effort into that. Yeah. And he'll send us pictures. Matter of fact, let me find this. I'll show it to you. He just sent it the other day. Let's see. Here it is. He said winds blowing right at 60. Talking about gusts right at 60 today. Let's see. It was 95 yesterday. Today a high 60. But look at that.
Oh, there you go, man. Oh, the wind don't affect them out there.
You just can't hear them.
Yeah, it's just sometimes I find that sometimes they get funny, and if it's calm, they don't know what to do.
But he sends videos like that all.
So y'all are going at a good time though. A year. Because I've been to Texas, over the years several times, but I go sometimes early, sometimes middle, sometimes late, and I'd have to say I like the later to go, but it don't always line up. Some of the reasons I take trips is just, like I said earlier, is just to extend turkey season, because I do like to hunt them. And so I'll usually take a trip somewhere early and then a trip or two later once our season is closed. So
yeah.
And I try not to do too much traveling. I usually stay pretty local, hunting Louisiana and Mississippi once, April gets here. So, but enjoy both of them.
Yeah, we're going to. Like I said, that's all I got planned. No, actually, no, I don't. This one is tentative, but my buddy who I'm in that lease with, and actually the guy that owns this building, the Corey Bar at Paris Restaurant, me, Zach, and Corey, we're going to Idaho.
Nice.
On a bear hunt in mid-May, our 3rd week of May. Yeah. We're going on an archery bear hunt. And I'm stoked for that. That's gonna be cool. Yeah, that's gonna be legit. I've eyeballed them here, long enough of wanting to shoot them.
Right.
And I'm excited to actually go draw back on one.
So you've been putting in for the bear lotteries each year?
Over
here, I'm talking about.
No, I've not.
No, you ought to.
I know I need to. I do. Yeah. I will this coming up year. I feel different about it now than once I started doing the episodes with John. I've done so many, and I've gotten to know him as well as I have. I know how the system actually is.
Right.
And I've gotten to see that firsthand of how the draw and how the system actually is, and also what the money is allocated to. That years past, the first 2 years, or last year and year before, I didn't put in. I'm like, I'm not throwing. I got better chance of winning the lottery. I'm not giving them my money for that. I'm just not doing it. And then, but once you actually go through and you see the draw, I know the odds are still low, but you see that. But you see where the money is allocated to. It makes you feel a whole lot better about it. But the bear hunt up there. It's over the counter, so it's an OTC tag, But the dude said, he's like, there's Merriam's. Like we're in Merriam country. And he's like, so you go and you kill your bear. He's like,
so are you going to be a chasing 49 guy?
I don't know if I'll be a chasing 49.
Really?
I don't know. What about you?
Nah, I'm not going to. I mean, I take a lot of trips, and people confuse, I think, sometimes what me and my buddies do is chasing 49, but I know I'll never have the time or resources to get close, but I just enjoy turkey hunting in different places. Mm-hmm. And to me, and my wife may cringe hearing me say this, but when I take a trip turkey hunting, it's so different than hunting around home in the season, because when you go somewhere on a hunting trip, that's what you have to do. You know, you don't have the work responsibilities or don't have to get home to do anything, you know, so it's so much different type of hunting and more, you know, I don't want to say more enjoyable, but in a way it's more enjoyable.
It is. Yeah, well, it is. Just like, you know, this week is spring break, and, you know, my wife and kids there. My wife's a school teacher, and so which my kids aren't old enough to go to school, but the church that they go to is they're out for spring break as well.
Yeah.
And so they're at the house, and we didn't have time, just couldn't make it where we could go out of town. But it's completely different staying at the house and doing a staycation, you know, at the house versus going out of town, going to Chattanooga or going to wherever else, going to the beach, whatever it is. It is different. And same thing like on your hunting trip that, man, I'd rather have, I've said this before, I'd rather have 10 days of the whole deer season. I'd rather have 10 days to go to Kansas and just deer hunt, even if it's broken up into 2 5-day trips. I'd rather have 10 days total to hunt out of state somewhere than what I would have all season here. Just because when you do go there, that's all you do.
That's right.
And that's all you're focused on.
Yeah. You're focused on it, and you just, you know, you drive, it's hard driven to get, you know, find turkeys and hunt them. And hey, if you wake up and the weather's bad, you know, just wait till it breaks. We'll go do something. Yeah. You know, we'll find something somewhere. So there's a group of us. I've in a couple of groups, and I hunt with a couple of buddies, or a buddy at work. We take a trip or two a year, and then a couple other buddies from school, from high school and stuff. We still go together and heckle each other, you know, and one of them dabbles around, makes some YouTube stuff, you know, and all of that. So I'm not crazy into that, but hey, it's fun. You can document your hunts, and, you know, it's something we can look back on when we're old and remember some of these things that we may have lost over time, you know. So I'm all about it. And then we have a lot of fun together, teasing each other. Become the camp life, you know, the older you get, and Dad told me that. He said, you're going to fade. You hear that in hunter ed when you take it, you know, the progression of hunters, you know, the newbies who barely can, those need the learning phase where you're getting good at it. Then you want to kill everything, you know, phase. And then you start slow going back on the scale, you know. So I'm at that point where camp life is fun too, you know. I don't have to go hunt hard. Don't mean I'm not going to go, you know, but I don't have to go 13 hours a day after them, you know, so it's fun.
And I don't want to go 13 hours a day after them, and I don't want to go to all 49 states trying to kill a bird.
See, and that to me in itself, it puts so much pressure on you when you are in a place that would take the fun out of it, you know. And I think that's why I'm not taking anything away from people who have done it and are wanting to do it. You know, I respect that.
Yeah, that's great. Not knocking it.
You know, but you got to be a different type of hunter to go do that than what I am currently. Because, just, you know, number one, to find the information you need to go, you gotta be able to rely on people that have done it. You know, and there's a network of people that are sharing stuff and getting that done. But again, and you think about it from a resource perspective, you know, you're like, holy crap, states like in Nevada and Arizona, and if everybody that turkey hunted was chasing 49, by the time they got close, they'd be chasing 45, you know, because there'd be 3 or 4 states that don't have turkeys anymore, you know, so, you know, it's not for everybody.
Well, and you got the resources, but just thinking of the other side of the resource, the cost alone, man.
Right, yeah.
Dude, I'm so ADD or ADHD or whatever you want to call it, that with the type of work that I do, the reason that I think it fits me and I do it so good is it's something different almost every minute. Like I have a different fire to put out constantly throughout the day. And it's the same thing with turkey hunting. Or hunting in general. I've always says like, what's your favorite kind of hunting? It's whatever I'm doing right now.
Right.
Like that's really it. But I like to elk hunt. And I like
See,
to
I've
go.
never elk hunted, but I think I would enjoy it.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's what they say. That's what Michael Waddell. I heard him.
But I'm not a bow hunter though, so that's part of my problem. I've killed deer with my bow. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not. I wouldn't classify myself as an all out bow hunter. So that may be problematic. I need to brush up on my bow hunting skills before I went on a full on elk hunt where they're bugling and everything else.
Yeah, well, Michael Waddell, that's what he said on one of those old Real Tree road trips forever ago. You'd watch on Saturday morning. He said turkey hunting is just a poor man's elk hunt. That's all it is. It's the same thing. And I've been this past year. I got really, really close in Arizona.
Really?
I'm talking about. I didn't kill, but I got, dude. It was close to two different big bulls, and it's the same. It's different. It's a different, I guess, scale of that feeling of hearing one just like a turkey, or gobble, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Hearing your guide, I wasn't calling, but hearing the guide, the way he talks to him and everything communicates, and you're working up your plan and having the woodsmanship to go about it.
The scheme,
it's the same thing. It's just a different scale.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
See that.
Yeah, but it's so much fun. Like I said, I like doing that. I like going to the Total Archery Challenge events. I like doing all that stuff and going and chasing nothing but turkeys for 2.5 months, whatever it would be, every single year. That'd be tough. Tell you what would be cool though. Michael Waddell, speaking of that, him and the owner of Jack Link's beef jerky. Do you see this video?
Mm-mm.
So it came out. It was last year. Yeah, it had been last year. So, but I just watched it within the last month or two. They went and tried to beat the record to kill all 4 species of turkeys, and they wanted to beat like 30 hours. So of course it's the owner of Jack Link's. He's got his jet, and they have everything scouted out. So they started off in Florida. So they started off on Osceolas, then they went to Georgia for Easterns, and then they flew into Woodward, Oklahoma for Rios, and they flew out of there into Colorado for your Merriams, and they did it all from start to finish in 10 hours and some odd minutes.
Holy cow.
Yeah. I mean, they would go, which of course they had it lined up, but it's still turkey hunting. Right. He ended up missing 1 or 2 birds, and they were able to get back on some pretty quick. So it could have been potentially even faster. But yeah, they had it lined up, had the airports ready, had the plane ready, and they would hop on there, and they'd be videoing them on the plane, eating a honey bun, drinking a Coke or whatever, still with a mouth collar or still with their vest on, Yeah. And one of them, they had a vest and a turkey was still in it, and they were flying to the next spot. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But well, man, let's get this thing wrapped up. We got 2 hours and 49 minutes. Well, the cameras, the format that I record on these cameras, with a 256 gig card, you can roll 2 hours and 49 minutes, I think is what it is. And we started a little bit earlier. Started those a little bit earlier, but this. Our board over here saying 2 hours, 29 minutes, and 20 seconds.
Holy cow.
And so
it don't seem like we've been talking that long. Have I been rambling about all this stuff
I don't even know what you said this whole time. I just blanked out. So no, dude, this has been awesome. I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. And like I said, anytime y'all need any assistance or anything like that, or most of us over at LDWF, we're going to try to stay, engaged and reach out. And I know all the species guys, love to be able to get information out there. And we think y'all are a good source to do that. So
man, we appreciate y'all. I mean, we really do. I wish the relationship that we had with y'all, I wish everybody had the chance of having that. It would just be, I feel like overall people look at y'all in a positive manner, but if they had the relationship and they got to really see what went on and they're just not basing things off assumptions, it'd be like, holy smokes, these guys, like, you really are, like, you're doing everything you can to help grow the turkey population. Same thing with the bears, John with the bears. And it's just, it's inspiring to go and see.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you coming on.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. No problem.
Appreciate you. So, well, all right. So SpottedDogSportingGoods.com. Check them out. Man, the new Drake, I don't know if you've seen the new mossy oak, the green leaf and the full foliage and all that stuff, but those new.
So are we really calling that new?
I'm saying
old. Remember, I started hunting in the 90s now. I have a 90s Shadow Branch vest now.
Really?
Like real.
Is it faded out almost white?
I kept it in good shape. Yeah.
Well, we even got it's the new old is what it is. The new old
Everybody's liking that. I'm glad to see it's full circle, just like, the choice of pants that teenage girls are wearing and everything. Just
it's
everything
just
from the 90s is coming back. Country music from the 90s is good again. I grew up in the 90s, so I love it.
Yeah, it's good. Well, yeah, we got all that stuff, and we have the performance, the high-tech stuff with the butt pads and knee pads and the $250 vests and all that other fancy stuff. We got all that. But when all that stuff came in, the first thing when Richard called, him and Michael One, they called and was like, dude, we just got some stuff in you got to come see. And so when I went down there and saw it and looked through every bit of it, I'm talking about all the expensive stuff, all the crap that I could have went and got. I say crap, it ain't crap, but out of all the stuff I could have went and got, I went to it's the old time cotton twilled button up and with the pants. Yeah. And I mean, it's thick. Can't hardly move around a whole lot with it. Almost feels starched when you first get it, And but that's what I levitate to. And I've washed it 2 times to kind of get it a little bit loose.
Be careful though, it might fade on you.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing. You don't want to turn it white like I'm talking about. You don't want it fading. But man, that stuff is, I don't know. It's fun going back to that old stuff. But anyhow, got all that, all the TSS, the turkey chokes, the turkey guns, all that new stuff. I'm ready to see the report that people give us for that new Benelli AI barrel. It's not artificial intelligence. So, but and I forget what it stands for. It's the I forgot. Anyhow, it's
the new pattern technology.
Yeah, it's got a tighter pattern. I forget what the AI freaking stands for. I'm sounding like a dummy up here. But anyhow, we got all that stuff. So check it out, SpottedDogSportingGoods.com. Free shipping on all orders over $99 or more. Come check us out in store. The Tone 29. Man, those calls have been selling they've been selling like hotcakes. They are rolling. So that don't forget, depending on what time y'all leave in the morning, I'll get that set up at the store and you go and pick up some. So Cody, appreciate you. You and everybody else at LDWF. Appreciate you coming on. All right, see y'all next time. Bye.